Chapter 32:51. Chu Li's expression changed. He quickly grabbed Shao Qi and disappeared in a flash. Bang! He was hit on the back and appeared on Jade Guardian Island in the next moment. Pfft! Chu Li spat out a mouthful of blood and let go of Shao Qi. Are you alright? Shao Qi thought. Chu Li shook his head and smiled. It's just a small injury. It's nothing serious. Spiritual energy surged from all directions. The Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture was activated. The palm was unusually heavy and injured his internal organs, but he quickly healed them. Chu Li shook his head. Looks like the Sword Moon Sect's top-notch master is really here. How dare they? His cultivation level allowed him to dominate the world. Even in the Sword Moon Sect, one of the 8 major sects, there were only 2 or 3 people who could defeat him. He initially thought that the Sword Moon Sect would not send such a master because it was easy to provoke an enlightened master. He did not expect them to be so bold. It seemed like they were really angered. Don't go. Shao Qi quickly shook her head. Chu Li shook his head. If I don't go, they'll definitely attack the High Duke's public house. We can't stop them. His heaven-pilfering skill failed to predict their appearance, so he wanted to know why. Shao Qi stood in the garden of Jade Guardian Island as she watched Chu Li disappear. Her beautiful face was solemn and her brows were tightly knitted together. Her cultivation level had been improving, but compared to Chu Li, it was like a slow walk and a galloping horse. Now, the difference was so huge that it had become a burden. If it was not for her, he would not have been hit. Thinking of this, her heart sank. She pursed her lips and decided to cultivate in isolation. 2 white-haired elders looked around. One was depressed and angry while the other shook his head and sighed. The elder with a particularly big head and short stature shook his head and sighed. Chu Li, you're really lawless. The Fu dynasty's 8 major sects had always stood proudly in the world. Other than the Fu dynasty, the martial arts world of the other 4 countries dared not provoke the 8 major sections. They did not expect a mere chief of the High Duke's public house from the Ji dynasty to be so bold as to kill so many disciples from the 8 major sections. If they could not kill Chu Li and annihilate the High Duke's public house, the prestige of the 8 major sects would cease to exist. The Ji dynasty, the Li dynasty, the Zheng dynasty, and the Qiu dynasty would all become restless. The other old man had a lion's nose, a wide mouth, and a body as sturdy as a tower. He stroked his thick white beard and sneered through gritted teeth. A bunch of trash. The short, big-headed elder sighed. It's not that they're incompetent, it's just that Chu Li is too powerful. Who knew that he could predict their location and set up a formation in advance? This is all the work of the Stargazing Pavilion. In my opinion, we shouldn't be in a hurry to kill him. We should greet the Stargazing Pavilion first. Even the disciples of the Stargazing Pavilion will be killed without mercy. The sturdy old man sneered. All right, then kill him. Kill me. Chu Li suddenly appeared. He looked around at the formation and shook his head. Looks like the 2 of you also have formation-breaking talismans. Hee, I'm Li Zidong from the Great One Palace. The small-headed elder shook his head and smiled. This is Chen Jining from the Sword Moon Sect. Our Great One Palace's formation-breaking talismans are quite amazing. Chu Li, you dared to kill so many disciples from the Sword Moon Sect. Aren't you afraid of the Sword Moon Sect's revenge? Chu Li looked at the sturdy old man, Chen Jining, and said faintly, Previously, I personally went to the Sword Moon Sect to defend myself. I didn't want to offend the Sword Moon Sect, but unfortunately, the Sword Moon Sect didn't give me a way out at all. Before I could say anything, you guys already attacked me. I know that even if I kneel down and beg, you guys won't let me go. If that's the case, what's there to be afraid of? Arrogant. Chen Jining gritted his teeth and sneered. Do you think you can escape? Don't think that you have a formation. Look around. Chu Li smiled. Impressive. Li Zidong waved his hand and chuckled. It's a piece of cake. It's not worth mentioning. Chen Jining sneered. Today is the day you die. After you die, the public house will be buried with you. Up until now, I've killed more than 40 Sword Moon Sex Masters. There were 3 groups of people. Other than this group, the other 2 groups were ambushed by me. More than half of them were killed or injured, but they managed to escape. Damn it! Chen Jining was extremely furious. Li Zidong smiled. I'd like to ask, how did you calculate the whereabouts of the Sword Moon Sect disciples? Chu Li said, heavenly secrets must not be revealed. It has nothing to do with Stargazing Pavilion, right? Chen Zidong asked. Chu Li shook his head. That's good, that's good. Li Zidong smiled. You're a smart person. Unfortunately, smart people don't usually live long. Chen Jining said solemnly, this will be your burial ground. Chu Li said, that might not be the case. If you kill 1 person from the High Duke's public house, I'll kill 10 people from the Sword Moon Sect. Goodbye. As soon as he finished, he flashed and was about to disappear. Swoosh. The sword flashed and stabbed in front of him. It was so fast that he could not escape. Ding. Chu Li swung his sword and stabbed. The tips of the 2 swords collided and they both took a step back. You're really capable, Li Zidong praised. As soon as he finished, he took out a jade pendant and gently crushed it. A green light shone on Chen Jining. Chen Jining's sword suddenly disappeared. He could no longer be seen. It was unbelievably fast. Swoosh! Chu Li's shoulder was hit. If he had not been vigilant and twisted his body, the sword would have pierced his heart. Swoosh! His shoulder was hit again. Chen Jining was unbelievably fast. The omniscient mirror could see him. Moreover, he had consumed the wind spirit pill, so his body movement and reflexes were much faster than ordinary people. Yet, he was not faster than Chen Jining's sword. Under the observation of the omniscient mirror, Chen Jining's body was covered in a layer of faint green light. This green light seemed to be able to break through the restraints of space, allowing Chen Jining to break through his limits and move as fast as lightning. Li Zidong from the Great One Palace chuckled. This is our space-piercing talisman. How's its effect? Chu Li frowned. I have nothing to do with the Great One Palace. Why should I get involved? The Great One Palace and the Sword Moon Sect have a deep relationship. We help each other. Li Zidong shook his head and smiled. How can we stand by and do nothing when the Sword Moon Sect is in trouble? Very well. Chu Li laughed coldly. What else do you have? Show me. After being hit twice, he was able to avoid the extremely fast and invisible sword. It was all because of the nature restoration manifestation. After the Heavenly Heart technique had perfected the 10th level, the nature restoration manifestation had improved greatly. He already had a good understanding of the Sword Moon Sect's sword techniques, so he could predict Chen Jining's sword force. After more than 10 strikes, Chen Jining roared, again. Elder Chen, think carefully, Li Zidong said. Chen Jining shouted, less? Clang. He was furious. He did not expect that he could not kill Chu Li even after using the space-piercing talisman. It seemed like the 2 strikes were not a big deal. If he could not kill this guy today, not only would he be embarrassed, but he would also be a sinner of the Sword Moon Sect. Sigh. Li Zidong shook his head and took out a jade pendant. TSS. A shrill whistle was heard as a cold light shot at Li Zidong. Chu Li swung his light blade. The light blade pierced through Li Zidong's shadow without any resistance. Li Zidong chuckled as he stood 20 feet away. He shook his head and laughed. Young man, you're full of murderous intent. As he spoke, he crushed the jade pendant. Another green light shot at Chen Jining. Chu Li suddenly dodged and stood in front of Chen Jining to block the green light. Chapter 32:52. Ha! Li Zidong laughed out loud. Chen Jining laughed out loud as well and shook his head without saying a word. Chu Li spat out a mouthful of blood. His internal organs had been severely injured, So he quickly inhaled and exhaled spiritual energy and channeled the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture. The two complemented each other and quickly healed his injuries. Then, he stared at the two men with a gloomy expression. "Haha, Chu Li, did you really think that you could take advantage of us?" Li Zidong shook his head and laughed. "I'm really sorry. You weren't hit by a space-piercing talisman, but an energy-piercing talisman. Do you feel that your inner energy is starting to leave your body and is getting weaker?" Chu Li clutched his chest and scoffed. "Looks like you guys have cheated a lot of people. You're the 20th Grandmaster who has fallen to this energy-piercing talisman, and you're the one with the highest cultivation level." Li Zidong shook his head. "To be honest, you're indeed a genius. You've achieved such a cultivation level at such a young age. Other than that monster Wei Wuwei, you're the most powerful." Chu Li replied coldly, "I don't deserve it. You don't have to waste time. There's no hope of channeling to heal your injuries." Li Zidong shook his head. "The space-piercing talisman will become more and more powerful, and your inner energy will become weaker. In the end, you'll be weakened to the innate mastery's boundary." "Impossible," Chu Li said coldly. "The Great One Palace's foundation is the Jade Talisman technique." Li Zidong grinned. "Our martial arts aren't as exquisite as the other 7 sects, but with the protection of the Jade Talisman, we're immune to all kinds of poisons, so no one dares to provoke us. This energy-piercing talisman makes the sword disappear. Both the person and the sword vanish." Chapter 3253. When Chen Jining saw Chu Li slowly but accurately poking the tip of his sword, he knew something was wrong. A strange force came from the sword like lightning, causing his body to go numb and lose control. Even with the space-piercing talisman, he could not help but slow down and lose control. A dark light flashed from Chu Li's waist and sliced Chen Jining's neck, separating his head from his body. "Stop!" Li Zidong screamed. Chu Li disappeared in a flash and reappeared in front of Li Zidong in an instant. He looked at him calmly and in high spirit. His previous weakness and paleness disappeared, as if he had become a different person. "You!" Li Zidong was shocked and looked at him in confusion. Chu Li said, "The energy-piercing talisman is just SOSO. What treasured weapons do you have?" Li Zidong frowned. Chu Li said, "I have nothing else. It's just Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture." Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture. Li Zidong's expression changed and he gritted his teeth. "Fine, I didn't expect you to have Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture. I'm unlucky. Since Buddhism was expelled from the Fu dynasty, Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture was extinct in the Fu dynasty. However, it still existed in the other 4 countries. The Great One Palace's Jade Talisman technique was powerful, but it was the nemesis of Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture. The Jade Talisman was like fire meeting water when it came to cultivators of Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture. However, Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture could not restrain the Jade Talisman. He did not use the energy-piercing talisman on Chu Li and only used the space-piercing talisman on Chen Jining. Li Zidong shook his head in frustration and sighed. Unlucky. If he had not used the energy-piercing talisman, he and Chen Jining would not have been misled by Chu Li. They would not have fallen into his trap and were eventually killed by him. Chu Li said, "I have nothing to do with the Great One Palace. I'll let you go this time, but don't blame me for being ruthless the next time I meet people from the Great One Palace." Li Zidong shook his head. "Chu Li, you're powerful but you can't escape." Chu Li could not help but laugh. "Without the Great One Palace, how could the Sword Moon sect have broken through my formation? They would have been annihilated. This time, we'll be able to kill 60 to 70 of them. Let's see how much more trouble they can cause. Even without these dozens of people, the Sword Moon sect's strength is still great. It won't collapse." Li Zidong shook his head and said, "But your public house is different. You only have a dozen or so grandmasters. Even if 2 of them die, your strength will be greatly damaged. How can you compare to the Sword Moon sect? If anything happens to the High Duke's public house, I'll kill every disciple of the Sword Moon sect one by one. Unless they hide in the Sword Moon Peak and never come out. Good, you're vicious enough. Li Zidong nodded and said, if you kill Old Chen, not only will the Sword Moon sect not be afraid, but they will also become even more furious. They will charge over even more frenziedly. Can you handle that? Chu Li smiled without saying a word. Li Zidong asked, do you need some jade talismans to help? Chu Li scoffed. Is this how the Great One Palace does things? This is just my personal way of doing things. Li Zidong shook his head and said, you are worth helping. Maybe you can help me in the future. Chu Li smiled. How do you know that I'm willing to help you? There's no harm in having another friend. Li Zidong smiled. But my jade talismans are not cheap. Chu Li waved his hand and said, there's no need for that. All right then, let's see if you can get through this. Li Zidong waved his hand and fluttered away. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from Chu Li's sight. Chu Li quietly watched him disappear, deep in thought. It seemed that the so-called cooperation was not an iron plate. There were gaps that could be exploited. In the next moment, he disappeared in a flash and reappeared in front of the Church of the Divine Blood's Valley. He had changed his appearance. He was just a mediocre middle-aged man. It was difficult to remember him clearly. That night, he attacked the Church of the Divine Blood from here and broke into the Sutra Library. At that time, with Zhao Dai's identity, the scene was still vivid in his mind as if it was just yesterday. Wei Wuwei's martial arts amazed him. Apart from Sun Mingwei, only Wei Wuwei had such a cultivation level at such a young age. Chu Li's cultivation level had improved greatly, but he did not know how far he was from Wei Wuwei. However, this was not the time to compete with Wei Wuwei. If something happened to him, the public house would be in danger. It was more important to get down to business. Who are you? 2 young men in black clothes fluttered in front of him and scoffed. Their eyes flashed as they examined him. Chu Li took out a letter and said, I'm a disciple of the Prophecy Pavilion. This is a letter for Wei Wuwei. Please pass it to him. As he spoke, he gently threw the letter at one of the young men like a flying knife. The young man caught it firmly and frowned at Chu Li. He felt the numbness in his fingers and knew that his cultivation level was higher than his. He scoffed. Prophecy Pavilion? Chu Li nodded. Yes, Wei Wuwei will know after reading the letter. Tell me your name. No need. Chu Li fist saluted and said, Goodbye. He turned and fluttered away. The 2 young men did not chase after him. The letter was quickly delivered to a magnificent basilica in the valley. There were 2 people sitting in the hall. One was a tall and valiant young man in a dark green robe. He was handsome and elegant, and he wore a dark green robe. He was Wei Wuwei. The other was a handsome middle-aged man who was reading a stack of scrolls. He was Wei Wuwei's senior brother, Zhang Shi. An old man quietly handed the letter to Wei Wuwei. Wei Wuwei sat boldly on the armchair and casually took out the letter. He glanced at it and smiled. Interesting. Zhang Shi put down the file and asked gently, What's the matter? Wei Wuwei smiled and handed it over. Senior Zhang, someone sent a message saying that the Sword Moon sect went to the Ji dynasty to deal with the public house. The result was a mess. Dozens of grandmasters were killed and their strength was greatly reduced. Oh, is it true? Zhang Shi reached out and took the letter. He quickly glanced at it and nodded. What's the intention of the person who wrote it? Nothing more than to stir up trouble. Wei Wuwei shook his head and smiled. He said it was the Divine Intelligence Pavilion. In my opinion, it should be the Stargazing Pavilion. Zhang Shi frowned. He wants us to take the opportunity to deal with the Sword Moon sect and then deal with us? Wei Wuwei said, Most likely. We have to be careful. Zhang Shi's face darkened. Stargazing Pavilion will pay for this sooner or later. Daring to invade their altar was the biggest provocation. If they did not retaliate, it would be tantamount to letting everyone see the weakness of the Church of the Divine Blood. They would not miss the opportunity to hit them when they were down. The Sword Moon sect has always been overbearing. It's time to deal with them. Wei Wuwei smiled. Zhang Shi frowned. Isn't this what the Stargazing Pavilion wants? If we don't attack, everyone will know that we're afraid. Wei Wuwei scoffed. What if the Stargazing Pavilion takes the opportunity to attack again? Zhang Shi asked. Wei Wuwei said, then I'll attack the Sword Moon Peak alone. It's too dangerous. No matter how weak the Sword Moon sect is, it's still the Sword Moon sect. Wei Wuwei smiled. The Sword Moon Peak can't keep me here. It's time to let others know how powerful we are. After the Church of the Divine Blood was dealt a heavy blow, everyone was eyeing them covetously. He needed to raise his reputation and form a deterrent force. Otherwise, there would be another battle to attack the mountain. All right. Zhang Shi sighed. Thank you, junior brother Wei. Wei Wuwei said, after this, I'll go to the Ji dynasty to take a look. I want to see what kind of powerful people can provoke the Sword Moon sect. Chapter 3254. After Chu Li sent the news to the Church of the Divine Blood, he did not need to guess to know the result. With Wei Wuwei's pride, even if he knew it was a trap and was being used, he would not let it go. The Church of the Divine Blood needed this opportunity. If they could heavily injure the Sword Moon sect, the other sects would be intimidated. They would know that the Church of the Divine Blood was still the Church of the Divine Blood and not a toothless tiger. He suddenly appeared on Jade Guardian Island. There were no lights on Jade Guardian Island. The moonlight poured down like water. Xiao Qi was practicing her swordsmanship in the garden. Her sword flashed like lightning and she was drenched in sweat. Her face was flushed but her eyes were cold. Chu Li knew what she was thinking when he saw her. He shook his head helplessly. He knew that she was in a dead end and felt that she was a burden. He leaped into the circle of swords and fought with her. After 100 moves, Xiao Qi put away her sword. Her eyes were calm again. She rolled her eyes at him, knowing that he was coaxing her. If he really went all out, her regal sword technique would not last more than 10 moves. Chu Li smiled and shook his head. Madam, your swordsmanship is excellent and your cultivation level is high. I was gifted by heaven and had a fortuitous encounter. Don't worry, I've thought it through. Xiao Qi glanced at him. Chu Li let out a sigh of relief and smiled. I've decided to isolate myself at Spirit Crane's Peak, Xiao Qi said. Chu Li's smile froze. Xiao Qi said, Don't worry, it's not what you think. I have to catch up to you. I just feel that I've been slacking for a while and need to tighten up. How long? Chu Li sighed. I'll be fine in a few days, Xiao Qi said. I've been feeling it lately. I might be able to break through a level. That's good. Chu Li smiled again. Let's go back to Tianshu Courtyard. Xiao Qi sheathed her sword. Second eldest sister might be worried. The two returned to Tianshu Courtyard in a flash. The night was like water. Tianshu Courtyard was brightly lit as if it was daytime. Xiao Shi was playing the guzheng in the gazebo. The sound of the guzheng was like a white crane dancing in the sky. She wore a snow-white gown, and her beautiful face glowed with a gentle luster under the light. It was as if she was carved out of white jade, and her beauty was beyond comparison. After Chu Li and Xiao Qi suddenly appeared, the music stopped abruptly. Xiao Shi looked up. Second eldest sister, Xiao Qi said, everything has been resolved. Xiao Shi nodded lightly and looked at Chu Li from head to toe. Chu Li smiled. I'm not hurt. Xiao Shi scoffed. How can you not be injured? Which time didn't I try to be brave? I'm really not hurt. Chu Li chuckled. I've cultivated the Heavenly Heart technique to the 10th level and used the Heaven Stealing skill to spy on their sneak attack routes. I set up a formation along the way and waited for them to ambush me. They fell into the trap one by one, and not many of them managed to escape. Xiao Shi's watery eyes suddenly lit up. Chu Li smiled and shook his head. Your heavenly heart technique cultivation level is still far from enough. You'll have to take it slow. There are no shortcuts. All right, Xiao Shi scoffed. I've only reached the 6th level. I'm still far from it. Chu Li smiled without saying a word. Naturally, he would not say that Xiao Shi was a genius who cultivated the heavenly heart technique, and that her speed was shockingly fast. They won't come back, right? Xiao Shi asked. Chu Li said, I'll inform the Church of the Divine Blood. If nothing goes wrong, the Sword Moon sect won't have the energy to care about this. You're fanning the flames. Xiao Shi pursed her lips and chuckled. You're really bad. Shao Qi smiled and told him that she was going to Spirit Crane's Peak to cultivate in isolation. Xiao Shi decided to cultivate in isolation too, so she could keep Chu Li company at Spirit Crane's Peak. Chu Li nodded. Suan should be here by now. Why isn't he here yet? Xiao Shi frowned. Chu Li nodded. No matter how slow Suan was, he should have reached the fairy's capital by now. Xiao Shi said, I need to see Suan before I cultivate in isolation. I need to inform him so that he won't think that we're avoiding him and neglecting him when he arrives. She looked at Chu Li with her bright eyes. You can find him directly, can't you? More or less. I'll try. Chu Li said. He gave Suan a titanium Sarira prayer bead. Through it, he could sense Suan and arrive in an instant. Bring second eldest sister there. I'll see him later, Shao Qi said. All right. Chu Li nodded. He grabbed Xiao Shi's waist and disappeared in an instant. The next moment, the two appeared outside an inn in a small town. The inn was brightly lit with lanterns hanging high. The inn only had one floor. Standing outside, one could hear loud chatter and laughter from inside. The sweet singing and the sound of strings mixed together. It was lively. Xiao Shi wore a white gown and a white veil covered her face. She looked at the inn from top to bottom. Suan is staying here? Chu Li nodded. The two stepped into the inn. As expected, the main hall was a restaurant. The tables were filled with people. Suan sat alone at a table. He was eating 2 plates of vegetarian dishes with a smile on his face. He looked like he was in high spirit. He wore a red robe and was very eye-catching. He was young, which made him even more unique. However, no one came to disturb him. They all pretended not to see him. The Ji dynasty and the Li dynasty worshipped Buddhism. Monks had a high status. Chu Li and Xiao Shi sat directly opposite him. Suan stood up in surprise and bowed with pressed palms. Big brother Chu, Aunt Xiao Xiao. Xiao Shi rolled her eyes at him. What are you doing dilly-dallying all the way here? Suan felt a sense of familiarity and warmth when she glanced at him. There was no longer any awkwardness or distance. He scratched his head. I want to observe people's hearts. What's there to observe? Humans are evil by nature. None of them are good. It's fine if you don't observe. Xiao Shi scoffed. It'll be peaceful even if you don't observe. Suan shook his head. Everyone has a Buddhist nature. Come on. Xiao Shi rolled her eyes at him. She pinched her thumb and scoffed. There's only a little bit of Buddhist nature. The rest is evil. That's why it's so hard to become a Buddha. Suan was stunned. He was speechless. Chu Li smiled. You two talk first. I'll be right back. Go ahead. Xiao Shi waved her hand. Her bright eyes stared at Suan. Chu Li shook his head and laughed. Her feelings for Suan were pure concern. Suan also saw her as family. Both of them did not spend much time together. This was fate. Chu Li disappeared from the tavern. His figure flashed twice and appeared in a restaurant not far away. This restaurant was brightly lit as if it was daytime. It was much more popular than the tavern. The 3rd floor where he was at was quiet. The rooms were quiet and elegant. He could vaguely hear the noise from below. It was a good place to stay in. He knocked on the door of one of the rooms. "Come in." A melodious voice came from inside. Chu Li pushed the door and entered. A graceful woman was sitting lazily inside. It was Lu Yurong. She was holding a wine glass and raising it gently. Chu Li sat opposite her and smiled. "Miss Lu, you really care about Suan. I'm returning your favor," Lu Yurong said. Chu Li shook his head and smiled. "I don't think so." Lu Yurong smiled. "Are you afraid that I'll harm him?" Chu Li said, "Miss Lu, your methods are not ordinary. Do you really want to take Suan's life?" He saw the masters surrounding Suan. They were surrounding him. There was a murderous aura. It was obvious that they wanted to kill Suan but were trying their best to hide their murderous aura. Chapter 3255. Chu Li sighed. This was the Crown Prince's idea, right? Lu Yurong said, "The Crown Prince would not have thought of this." Then Miss Lu must have figured out the Crown Prince's intentions. Chu Li shook his head and sighed. "You really are taking precautions." Lu Yurong poured a glass of wine for Chu Li and handed it to him personally. "If you were me, what would you do?" Chu Li nodded. "Kill him first. As long as you understand." Lu Yurong smiled brightly. Her face was brighter than the light. "If it wasn't for me, Suan would have died many times already." Chu Li frowned. "If that's the case, I have to thank you, Miss Lu." "You don't have to thank me, as long as you don't blame me." Lu Yurong shook her head. Chu Li said impatiently, "What about the favor? If you do this, how are we going to live in the future?" Lu Yurong pursed her lips and smiled. "I will definitely keep my word. I have been suppressing them and personally stopping them from making a move." Chu Li looked at her deeply. He could not tell if what she said was true or false. No matter what, Lu Yurong really wanted to kill Suan. She did not do it because she was worried about him. Lu Yurong said, "I heard that the Fu dynasty's Sword Moon sect attacked the High Duke's public house, but you stopped them?" Chu Li nodded. Lu Yurong laughed. "Your ability is getting better and better. You provoked the Sword Moon sect and still managed to escape unscathed. I'm really impressed." Chu Li gave her a sidelong glance. Lu Yurong shook her head. "The Sword Moon sect will not let you go. You can hide for now but not forever. In my opinion, it's better not to leave the fairy's capital." Chu Li said, "The Sword Moon sect is not that scary." "The Sword Moon sect is scarier than you think." Lu Yurong scoffed. "The 8 major sects are not to be trifled with. No matter how powerful you are only one person. You can't stop them." Chu Li smiled and did not say much. Lu Yurong scoffed. "All right, I promise I will not assassinate Suan within a year." Chu Li said, "Miss Lu, you are getting more and more scheming in front of me." It had been less than 2 years since the Emperor ascended to the realm beyond heavens. Within a year, no matter how much Suan tried, he would not be able to cause any trouble. A year later would be the most crucial moment. If Suan continued to cause trouble, they would kill him. Lu Yurong took a sip of the fine wine. "Don't worry about Suan for now. Take care of yourself first. Don't get killed by the Sword Moon sect. You won't be able to protect yourself." After she finished speaking, she smiled sweetly, looking extremely flirtatious. Chu Li was being held back by the Sword Moon sect. She felt as if a huge boulder had been removed from her shoulders. Chu Li's existence was like an invisible boulder. Even if he did not make a move, there was still an invisible deterrent. Chu Li scoffed. "Even if I can't even protect myself, it's not difficult for me to fight to the death. You should advise the Crown Prince not to do anything stupid. If anything happens to Suan, I'll have no other choice." Lu Yurong narrowed her bright eyes, looking cold. Chu Li stared back at her calmly. After staring at each other for a long time, they slowly moved their eyes away. From an outsider's point of view, they seemed to be gazing at each other passionately. However, it was actually the glint of swords, filled with murderous intent. "All right, I'll talk to the Crown Prince." Lu Yurong felt Chu Li's determination. Her heart trembled as she nodded carelessly. Chu Li smiled. "That's good. He stood up and closed-fist saluted. Then I'll take my leave. Lu Yurong scoffed and rolled her eyes. She turned her back to him and looked out the window. Chu Li smiled as he pushed the door open. Chu Li and Suan sat at the square table. Xiao Shi was at the side pouring tea for them. Suan pressed his palms together and received the teacup with both hands. Chu Li casually took the teacup and took a sip. He looked at Suan. Suan, have you thought it through? Do you want to fight for the throne? Fight for the throne? Suan looked hesitant. Chu Li said, if you want to train your heart, you might as well sit on the throne. That's the best way to train your heart. Suan hesitated. If I were to fight for the throne, I'm afraid I'll attract countless deaths. The fight for the throne had always been a bloody one. If he made this decision, who knows how many people would die. Chu Li smiled. You're cultivating the 10 lifetimes of Buddhahood. Can't you see through life and death? Can't you transcend life and death? Suan shook his head. Chu Li said, looks like you're not a qualified disciple of the Titanium Temple. Xiao Shi scoffed. That's for the best. Is it good to have a cold heart and look at the world with cold eyes? This is the way to transcend, Chu Li said. Only this way can you obtain the samadhi of the Titanium Temple's heart technique. Cold and inhumane. What's so good about it? Xiao Shi pouted. Suan nodded. He was kind by nature and did not like fighting or noise. The reason he left the temple to cultivate this time was to temper his state of mind and improve himself. If not for that, he would not have left the temple. He felt that living in the temple was the most stable and comfortable. Looks like you don't want to fight for the throne, Chu Li said. Suan nodded. Xiao Shi said, if you don't want to, then don't. Don't force yourself. The throne isn't that good. The emperor can only live for 100 years. Suan smiled apologetically. Chu Li nodded. If you don't want to, don't stay in the fairy's capital for too long. Don't exceed a year. Or else the crown prince will make a move. Yes. Suan pressed his palms together. Xiao Shi let out a sigh of relief. I was afraid that Suan would not be satisfied. Suan shook his head. I like to cultivate quietly. I don't want to do anything else. That's good. Xiao Shi smiled. She turned to glare at Chu Li. Since Suan doesn't want to fight for the throne, you don't have to waste your energy. Chu Li smiled. Actually, at this point, it's very difficult to seize the throne. Whether Suan got the throne or not did not affect him. He still had to continue. There was only one way for Suan to seize the throne: force the emperor to change his mind and appoint Suan as the emperor. There was only one way to force the emperor to change his mind. He had to become an enlightened master, or else it would be impossible to force the emperor. Suan did not want to seize the throne. The crown prince would kill him after he ascended the throne. With the High Duke's public house around, he could not escape even if he wanted to. The only way to protect himself was to become an enlightened master. No matter how he thought about it, he only had less than 2 years. Countless geniuses and heroes pursued it for their entire lives, but to no avail. It would be a joke if he wanted to become an enlightened master in 2 years. Unfortunately to him, if he could not complete it, even if he could fake his death with the life and death scripture, he could not keep faking his death and wait for the crown prince to ascend to heaven 100 years later. Moreover, he would not allow himself to live such a useless life. Vigorous freedom, unrestrained freedom, this was the way he chose to live. As he thought about this, he felt a sense of urgency. It's getting late. We should go back. Xiao Shi was reluctant to leave. Suan, hurry to the fairy's capital. Yes. Suan nodded. Xiao Shi smiled and was brought away by Chu Li. The next morning, Chu Li appeared outside the Sword Moon sect. He used the omniscient mirror to observe the surroundings and silently floated into the Sword Moon sect. The entire Sword Moon Peak was under his observation. He saw Wei Wuwei in a dark green robe striding up the Sword Moon Peak. There were already 2 elders waiting in a gazebo. Their eyes were bright. Chapter 3256. Chu Li had already found out that the Church of the Divine Blood was not very popular. The Stargazing Pavilion and the White Palace had joined forces to attack their headquarters once. Logically speaking, the Church of the Divine Blood's enemies should be the Stargazing Pavilion and the White Palace. However, this was not the case. In terms of hatred, the Sword Moon sect had the deepest hatred. The Stargazing Pavilion and the White Palace were new enemies, while the Sword Moon sect was old. The hatred between the Divine Blood Church and the Sword Moon sect had been going on for hundreds of years. Their swords and blades had been fighting against each other. The hatred had already entered their bloodline and could not be resolved. Every generation of disciples had died at the hands of the other. Although they were all disciples of the 8 great sects, and even if a Grandmaster died, they could still enter the enlightened God grounds of their respective sections. Perhaps they did not need to go directly to the Grandmaster's boundary. However, killing them was still killing them, and their hatred would not lessen because of that. When Wei Wuwei heard the news of the Sword Moon sect being destroyed, he definitely wouldn't let go of this opportunity to add insult to injury. The experts of the Sword Moon sect had been injured. If they were also defeated by him, the prestige of the Sword Moon sect would drop to its lowest point. By then, the other sects would definitely add insult to injury, which would greatly weaken the Sword Moon sect and give the Church of the Divine Blood a chance to take revenge. Chu Li sat cross-legged in a forest at the foot of the mountain. He closed his eyes slightly and observed Wei Wuwei's every move with the omniscient mirror to determine his cultivation level. Wei Wuwei's cultivation was still a level higher than his. While he was improving, Wei Wuwei was also improving, and at a faster rate. Chu Li shook his head lightly. He was a genius, but Wei Wuwei was even more of a genius. Comparing oneself to others was truly infuriating. Wei Wuwei came to the gazebo with large strides, waved his hand and said, "No need to say any more, just make your move. Your Sword Moon sect better not use that tactic of taking turns to fight me. Otherwise, the ones who will be embarrassed will still be you. I will not show any mercy." Little brat Wei? Guy, is it hard to chew the Shi Bang Spring? They unsheathed their swords and pounced towards Wei Wuwei. Their swords flashed out like lightning and surrounded him from both sides, not giving Wei Wuwei a chance to dodge. Ding! Ding! Wei Wuwei's palms struck out, quickly and accurately hitting the tip of the sword. His hands looked as if they were carved out of white jade, and a warm luster circulated around them. They were exquisite and exquisite, making people worry that they would shatter at the slightest touch. But in the end, when he patted the sword was pushed far away, and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. The 2 elders frowned and waved their swords again. The powerful force coming from the swords almost made them lose their grip on the swords. They were about to fall out of their hands at any time, so their swords were a little slower. Ding! Ding! The 2 sword tips were once again struck by the white jade-like palms, and were sent flying far away. Their swordsmanship was exquisite. They spun their swords with the momentum and became even faster. However, the powerful force from the swords still made their palms numb. It was even more difficult to grasp the sword hilt. They could only use their arms to move their wrists to control the sword. Ding ding! The sword's momentum became faster, but it was still not as fast as Wei Wuwei's palms. The 2 swords finally broke free from his hands and flew out, tumbling in the air before burrowing into the nearby forest. The 2 elders felt their palms go numb as they stared at their swords in disbelief. They were unable to dodge Wei Wuwei's palm energy in time. Bang bang! The 2 of them flew out as if they were chasing their own swords. They fell into the forest and stopped moving. They had already breathed their last. Although their cultivation levels were high, a single blood jade palm took their lives. Wei Wuwei clapped his hands and shook his head. They overestimated themselves. They were simply sending themselves to their death. How laughable, pathetic, and pitiful! He looked at the forest over there with a compassionate expression. He shook his head and left the gazebo. He continued to walk up the stone step. He took large strides and crossed 2 stone steps in a single step. However, he did not use his light body technique. Chu Li frowned and remained silent. He could clearly see that Wei Wuwei's blood jade palm was not exquisite, but it was fast and ruthless. He took advantage of the fact that the 2 elders' cultivation levels were lower than his. No matter how exquisite the 2 elders' swordsmanship was, it was useless against the blood jade palm unless the 2 of them did not let their swords touch the blood jade palm. Unfortunately, the blood jade palm was faster than their swords, so the outcome was determined. Chu Li also shook his head. The Sword Moon sect indeed liked to take turns to exhaust their cultivation levels before finally killing them in one blow. Chu Li watched as Wei Wuwei used the blood jade palm to move up and killed 10 top-notch masters like him. In the end, he encountered a white-haired elder. This white-haired elder was called Chen Ong. He was the first person under the sect leader of the Sword Moon sect. The sect leader was in isolated cultivation and could not come out, so he hurriedly came out to fight. Chen Ang's swordsmanship was so exquisite that Chu Li was amazed. It was a great inspiration to him. He had been combining the 7 forms of divine knife, the cloud-slashing divine sword, and later the great heaven-deriving sword, but he could not completely integrate them. His progress was slow. Now that he saw Chen Ang's swordsmanship, Chu Li was greatly touched and had a deeper understanding of swordsmanship. Chen Ang's swordsmanship was exquisite, and Chu Li was amazed. He knew that he was no match for Chen Ong. The Sword Moon sect was indeed one of the 8 major sections. They had a deep foundation. Chu Li was lucky to be able to escape last time because Chen Ong did not come out of isolated cultivation. However, no matter how exquisite Chen Ang's swordsmanship was, Wei Wuwei was still using the blood jade palm. It looked ordinary and had no fixed style. There were only 2 words: fast and ruthless. His palm was extremely fast and powerful. When his palm hit the body of the sword, it caused the sword to stagnate. Wei Wuwei took the opportunity to attack and suppress Chen Ang's swordsmanship. Chen Ong relied on the exquisite swordsmanship to turn the situation around. Soon, he was hit by Wei Wuwei's sword and fell into a disadvantage again. The 2 were in a stalemate for hundreds of moves. After almost 1,000 moves, they were both panting. As grandmasters, their inner energy was endless. However, their inner energy was consumed too quickly and could not be replenished in time. In the end, their strength weakened and their movements slowed down. Wei Wuwei, today is the day you die. Suddenly, loud laughter rang out. 2 elders appeared and rushed to the center of the field. Chu Li raised his eyebrows. He saw these 2 elders hiding in the forest far away. When he saw that Wei Wuwei was finally tired, he felt that the time was right. This method was really despicable, but it was very effective. The 2 of them pounced on Wei Wuwei. Their swords were everywhere. Wei Wuwei's movements were slow and difficult. He could not dodge as he wanted and was hit by 2 swords. However, he was wearing treasured clothing. The 2 swords could not pierce through his treasured clothing. "Haha, Chen Ong, I'm ashamed for your Sword Moon sect." Wei Wuwei suddenly laughed and his palms suddenly sped up. Bam bam! The 2 elders flew out. They were also great masters. Although they were not as good as Wei Wuwei, they were not too far off. Wei Wuwei suddenly became invincible. He was abrupt and strangely fast. He did not avoid the 2 swords and attacked with his palms, exchanging injuries for injuries. The 2 elders could not dodge in time. His palms had already landed on their chests. "Ha ha!" Wei Wuwei laughed. His treasured clothing did not break, but the 2 elders flew out. They spat out arrows of blood in the air. They could not move after falling to the ground. Wei Wuwei also took a sword from Chen Ong. It pierced his waist. The sword pierced through his treasured clothing. Blood gushed out like a fountain. Wei Wuwei fiercely clamped Chen Ang's sword. He did not care that Chen Ang's sword spun and widened his wound. He hit Chen Ong with his palm. Bam! Chen Ong flew out and spat out arrows of blood. After falling 10 meters away, he struggled to stand up and prepared to continue his attack. Wei Wuwei grabbed Chen Ang's sword and quickly pulled it out. He fiercely threw it into Chen Ang's chest. Chen Ong clutched the sword hilt and fell to the ground. He took out a jade bottle with difficulty. He opened it and poured all the pills into his mouth. He began to meditate and adjust his breath. He ignored the long sword in his chest. The lower half of Wei Wuwei's body was dyed red with blood. The wound was a round hole. Blood was gushing out. His intestines were twisted. It was extremely tragic. At this time, more than 10 masters rushed out of the forest and surrounded Wei Wuwei. Chapter 32:57. Chu Li frowned. Wei Wuwei would not be able to escape this time. He then raised his eyebrows. He remembered that Wei Wuwei's light body technique was also top-notch, but he did not use it when he went up the mountain. He only took large strides up the mountain. Now that he thought about it, he had a backup plan. He smiled. Those who had cultivated to this level were not stupid. Wei Wuwei was deliberately fooling the people from Sword Moon Sect, making them think that his light body technique was ordinary. Wei Wuwei took out a porcelain bottle and crushed it. 2 blood-red pills appeared in his palm. He then stuffed them into his wounds and pressed them down. He laughed and looked at the 12 masters, shaking his head in disdain. Sword Moon Sect? What a Sword Moon Sect! Wei Wuwei, you're too arrogant. Do you really think we can't do anything to you? A tall and thin elder with a face as long as a horse's shook his head and said slowly, You want to challenge Sword Moon Sect by yourself? I can only say that you're crazy. Sword Moon Sect, oh Sword Moon Sect. Wei Wuwei shook his head and laughed. If you can't beat me alone, you turn to the wheel. If the wheel can't beat me, you surround me. That's all you Sword Moon Sect can do. No matter what, it's enough to kill you. The horse-faced elder said indifferently, Winner takes all. No matter how strong your martial arts are, as long as you're dead, everything will be over. Alright, then let's see if you can kill me. Wei Wuwei laughed and shook his head. Unless your sect leader comes out of isolation. It's laughable that you good-for-nothings can kill me. Go. An elder beside him said impatiently, Why are you wasting time with a lunatic like him? Kill him. The horse-faced elder nodded. Everyone immediately stabbed with their sword. Ding 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 ding. With a series of clear sounds, Wei Wuwei slapped away the swords in front of him and shot down the mountain like a stream of light. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared in front of everyone, leaving behind some blood beads on the ground. Wei Wuwei's speed was extremely fast and there was no warning. They did not expect him to dare use a secret skill when he was so heavily injured. Caught off guard, they could only watch as he escaped. After him, everyone flew down. Chu Li frowned and pondered. He followed closely behind them to see if Wei Wuwei could escape. Back then, he had nearly died under Wei Wuwei's hands. If he could seize this opportunity to kill Wei Wuwei, it would be a blessing to avoid future troubles. It was as if Wei Wuwei had cast the Great Void Light technique. His speed was extremely fast, covering hundreds of meters in a flash. Even though the people from the Sword Moon Sect had top-notch light body techniques, they could not catch up to him. When they arrived at the foot of the Sword Moon Peak, more than 20 experts from the Divine Blood Church were already waiting there. The moment Wei Wuwei appeared, they immediately went forward and surrounded Wei Wuwei. Wei Wuwei shook his head in surprise. The bloody garment divine power was indeed mysterious. If it was anyone else, their injuries would have worsened and their wounds would have bled profusely. However, not only did Wei Wuwei not bleed, his wounds were sealed, and his flesh and blood recovered at a shocking speed. This was the mystery of the blood garment divine art. Their control of blood and chi was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Seeing more than 20 experts from the Divine Blood Church, the experts from the Sword Moon sect were not afraid. They were at the foot of the Sword Moon Peak. As long as they shouted, they could summon more experts. They decided not only to kill Wei Wuwei, but also to kill the 26 experts and deal a heavy blow to the Divine Blood Church. Wei Wuwei must die. The horse-faced elder stepped forward and stared at Wei Wuwei, who was resting on the ground with his eyes closed. If he doesn't die, we will fight to the death. You may not win. What a joke. One of the experts from the Divine Blood Church sneered. Hand over Wei Wuwei and we will stop, the horse-faced elder said in a deep voice. We only want to kill Wei Wuwei. Kill him? Kill him? Kill him? Chatter and chatter in a rut, then all of you will die together. The horse-faced elder's face darkened and he waved his hand. Kill them. Suddenly, there was a flash of sword light and a flash of knife light. The experts from the Divine Blood Church were good at knife technique. The knife light was like a waterfall while the sword light was like a cold star. When the two collided, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. The experts from the Divine Blood Church guarded Wei Wuwei closely and did not retreat. Chu Li thought for a moment and did not make a move. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. In just a short while, Wei Wuwei, who was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, did not decline. Instead, he had a breakthrough and his cultivation level had increased. His original injuries were no longer a hindrance. He suddenly opened his eyes and a faint purple light shot out from his eyes. Then, he slowly restrained it and shot out like a ghost, hitting the back of the horse-faced elder with his palm. The horse-faced elder sensed danger, but he did not manage to avoid the palm and was immediately sent flying. Bang! The horse-faced elder hit a tree and slid down softly as if all the bones in his body had been removed. He was seriously injured and on the verge of death. Wei Wuwei! Everyone roared and rushed toward Wei Wuwei. The sword light completely shrouded him. Wei Wuwei waved both of his palms and the sound of clanking could be heard. He used the blood jade palm to block all the sword light outside of his body. Not even a drop of water could enter his body. Instead, 2 long swords were sent flying. He then rushed forward and slapped the owners of the swords away, seriously injuring 2 more people. Retreat! A Sword Moon sect expert said in a deep voice. The experts turned around and left. They helped the horse-faced elder and the other 2 elders up and disappeared into the Sword Moon Peak in the blink of an eye. The Sword Moon sect was shrouded in a formation. It was impossible for the experts from the Divine Blood Church to force their way in. Ha ha! Everyone laughed. Young leader, are you okay? Someone asked. Wei Wuwei laughed and patted the wound that was already scarred. It's just a broken intestine. I won't die. Unfortunately, Chen Ong won't die either. Chen Ong is out? That guy is still impatient. I gave him a sword attack, but it didn't hit a vital point. Wei Wuwei looked regretful. Just a little bit more. Let's go. This time, it's clear. They are indeed injured. Looks like they met a tough opponent. I want to meet this Chu Li. Before he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. Chu Li was startled and turned to look behind him. Wei Wuwei was looking at him with a smile. Who are you? Chu Li raised his eyebrows. He was surprised. How did Wei Wuwei discover him? After all, he was 10 miles away. He could only see them talking through their lip. He could not hear them. When Wei Wuwei was breaking through, he suddenly felt a gaze on him. He followed his intuition and came here. As expected, he found someone and was curious about who was watching him. Chu Li shook his head and was about to disappear when Wei Wuwei said, Was it you who sent the letter? Chu Li stopped and looked at him. Wei Wuwei said, It's not the prophecy pavilion. It's you. Oh, are you Chu Li? Chu Li smiled. I'm Chu Li. Sneaky, I'm disappointed. Wei Wuwei looked at him and shook his head. Chu Li, I've heard of your name. I thought you were a hero. I didn't expect you to be as despicable as the Sword Moon sect. Chu Li said, I don't have enough strength. Young leader, you're amazing. I'm impressed. He was on guard. Wei Wuwei seemed to be smiling, but his murderous intent was surging. He wanted to kill him. Chapter 32:58. Chu Li took a step back and shook his head with a smile. It's useless, you can't hurt me. Wei Wuwei retreated and frowned at him. What martial art is this? Chu Li smiled without saying a word. Wei Wuwei's eyes flashed red. Not only did he not lose consciousness, but he became sharper and smarter. His thoughts were like lightning as he disappeared in a flash and reappeared 100 meters away. Ha ha, Chu Li laughed. Go, go, I'll spare your life. His face was full of mockery, contempt, and disdain. Wei Wuwei's face was gloomy, but he did not hesitate and reappeared 200 meters away. He was already very far away from Chu Li. He could still see the disdain and mockery on Chu Li's face. As he turned to leave, Chu Li's expression was still flashing in front of him. Ah! Wei Wuwei roared in anger. He suddenly appeared behind Chu Li and pushed with his palms. Bang! Chu Li flew forward. He seemed to have expected this attack. As he flew out, he fiercely swung his body backwards. Two cold lights suddenly shot in front of Wei Wuwei's eyes. Wei Wuwei let out a breath. The two flying knives were slowed by this force and immediately stopped. Wei Wuwei raised his head to avoid it. Tsk tisk. He had just avoided these two knives when the other two came at his throat. Wei Wuwei put his palms in front of his throat. Ding ding! The two knives fell as if they had hit iron. Chu Li crashed into a poplar tree. He extended his sword and pointed at the tree, shooting back at Wei Wuwei at an even faster speed. Ding 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 ding! The tip of the sword fell on Wei Wuwei like a sky full of starlight. Wei Wuwei waved his rouge-white jade palm to meet the starlight. In the blink of an eye, more than 100 swords pierced out. At first glance, it sounded like the lingering sound of one attack. Chu Li had already activated the heavenly demon body. His appearance did not change, but his speed was faster and his strength was stronger. The tyrannical power of the sword made Wei Wuwei secretly grit his teeth. His blood jade palm was trained to the extreme and was as hard as jade. Chu Li's modesty sword was sharp, but it could not break through his palms. The two were in a stalemate. After exchanging more than 1,000 blows in one go, Chu Li's sword force became more and more intense. His eyes were deep and serene, as if they could absorb the spirit of others. Wei Wuwei's eyes shot out a red glow, and his palms were white with a hint of red, forming a shadow. Dust, sand, leaves, and branches were all gone from the surroundings of the two of them. It was so clean that it seemed as if someone had ruthlessly swept it. A strange and cold baleful aura pervaded the surroundings. This was emitted by the blood jade palm. It could disturb one's state of mind, corrode one's body, and destroy the circulation of one's blood energy. This blood jade palm was extremely vicious and hard to defend against. Wei Wuwei suddenly disappeared 10 meters away. Chu Li sheathed his sword and looked at him coldly. Wei Wuwei's eyes flickered with red light, and he nodded and said, "Count yourself lucky, I'll spare you today." Without waiting for Chu Li to reply or mock him, he disappeared in a flash and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Chu Li heaved a long sigh of relief. This Wei Wuwei was really difficult to deal with. After using the heavenly demonic power, Wei Wuwei could not do anything to him, and it was also difficult for him to kill him. The stalemate between them was very troublesome. He took a deep breath and quickly dispelled the heavenly demonic power. He immediately activated the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture and Cloud Slashing Power. The baleful aura emitted by the blood jade palm had a great impact on one's blood energy and was extremely destructive to one's body. Even though he had consumed a large number of giant spirit pills and wind speed pills, he still had no resistance against this baleful aura. It was as if his body was being pricked by countless fine needles. He had to get rid of it in time, or else it would become a fatal injury. He activated the cloud-slashing power to devour this baleful aura. He was about to use the divine void light technique to leave, when he suddenly had a thought and disappeared in a flash. Bang! A red shadow flashed, and his disappeared figure reappeared. He was sent flying, and he spat out an arrow of blood in the air. A red-robed elder appeared where Chuli was just a moment ago. His eyebrows and beard were all red as if they had been dyed by cinnabar. His eyes were bright and piercing like electricity. He narrowed his eyes and stroked his red beard as he stared at Chuli. Chuli fell to the ground with a bang. His internal organs were boiling as if they were being cooked. The blood energy in his body was scattered, and he could not exert any strength. "You're quite capable, little boy." The red-robed elder shook his head and disappeared again. Chuli desperately activated the life and death scripture to absorb the spiritual energy from all directions. At the same time, he activated the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture in an attempt to reverse his injuries. However, the palm was too strong, and his internal organs were completely destroyed. The elder's palm energy had dissipated, and the heavenly demonic orb was useless. Only the life and death scripture and the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture could save his life. He could not use God's limbs now, and his body could not withstand the pressure of the void energy. He struggled to take out a jade bottle, poured out a spirit blessing pill, and popped it into his mouth. He looked at Wei Wuwei, who appeared and slowly approached him. Wei Wuwei looked at him calmly. His face was pale, and his eyes were no longer red. There was only indifference. "That's your master, right?" Chuli smiled bitterly as he struggled to stand up. Wei Wuwei nodded slowly. Chuli chuckled and shook his head. Wei Wuwei said, "Master personally took action. You can go in peace." Chuli smiled and shook his head. "I didn't expect your master to have such a cultivation level. He's only one step away from becoming an enlightened master, right?" The attack was sudden and fast, and it had the elegance of an enlightened master. "That's right." Wei Wuwei nodded slowly. "What martial art did you use?" He knew that Chuli was stalling for time to recover from his injuries. However, his master's blood jade palm was different from his. Even if he had a spirit medicine that could revive the dead, it would be impossible for him to recover in a short period of time. If he could not kill a severely injured Chuli, he would not be the young bishop of the Church of the Divine Blood. There were very few martial arts in the world that could block his blood jade palm. He really wanted to know the nameless technique. Chuli shook his head. The secret of the heavenly demonic power must not be leaked. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble. Once people knew about the heavenly demonic power, they would guess that he could change his identity. They would want to kill him even more, and they would not allow him to live. The identity of the heavenly demonic sect's disciples was unknown. They lived in the shadows because people were afraid of them. The nameless technique. Wei Wuwei frowned. Chuli said, "I got it by chance, so I don't know what martial art it is. This heart technique can be cultivated very quickly, but it can't stop the shamelessness of the Church of the Divine Blood. The Sword Moon sect is shameless, and so are you. You're all jackals of the same tribe." Wei Wuwei said plainly, "You're really strong, but you're from the Ji dynasty's martial arts world. Otherwise, I could spare your life to stimulate my cultivation." Having an equal opponent was the most beneficial for cultivation, so he would not slack off. Chuli was an excellent candidate. He was also a genius. He was young, but he had peerless martial arts and was also extremely intelligent. Chuli desperately urged the spiritual energy around him. The spirit blessing pill began to activate, but his internal organs did not show any signs of recovery. The blood in his body seemed to have lost its nutrients and turned into poison, constantly destroying his internal organs. Wei Wuwei said, "It's useless. My master's blood jade palm will directly destroy your vitality. The medicine is ineffective." Chu Li asked, "Is there any way to cure it?" Wei Wuwei smiled and shook his head. "There's no cure. I can only wait for death." Chu Li frowned. "If that's the case, I'll take my leave." Although his internal organs had deteriorated, the spiritual energy could be directly converted into inner energy. He activated the void light technique and disappeared in a flash. Chapter 3259. Wei Wuwei smiled, but his eyes were cold. "Chu Li, it's useless. You don't have to struggle anymore. You can't escape." Chu Li wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and frowned. "Must you kill me?" "Yes," Wei Wuwei said. "It's useless even if you kneel and beg." Chu Li took a deep breath and sighed. "I only have one request. Leave my corpse intact." Wei Wuwei looked deeply at him and finally shook his head, spitting out 2 words, "Behead." Beheading a person was the only way to kill him. This was his principle. Chu Li had a fortuitous encounter. Who knew if he had some special skill that could fool the world by pretending to be dead? Beheading him was more reliable. Chu Li sighed. "If that's the case, it's either you or me." "Yes," Wei Wuwei answered coldly. He knew that Chu Li would not reveal his heart technique, so he did not want to waste time talking to a dead person. He was already impatient and wanted to kill him. Chu Li disappeared in a flash. Wei Wuwei shook his head and disappeared too. Chu Li kept flickering and vomiting blood. The pressure from the void was worsening his injuries. He only shifted 1 mile at a time and did not dare to go further than that. Otherwise, the pressure from the void would be too great. Compared to teleporting 5 kilometers away, the pressure of the void was not only 10 times stronger, it was even 20 to 30 times stronger. Wei Wuwei watched as Qin Wentian coughed up blood and fled for his life, but he wasn't in a hurry to act. He wanted to see where Qin Wentian would flee to. Perhaps he would flee to the side of his beloved, and then die in front of her. That would be interesting. It was said that Chu Li's wife was a rare beauty. He wanted to see if he could kill Chu Li in front of her. That would be interesting. Chu Li suddenly stopped and took a step forward before disappearing again. Wei Wuwei frowned. He suddenly lost his sense of Chu Li as if he disappeared into thin air. He was completely dead. He understood in the next moment. Chu Li had entered a formation and was protected by it. His senses were cut off. He frowned and looked around. After a while, he shook his head. He could not sense the existence of the formation at all. This was obviously a very advanced invisible formation that could deceive one's senses. This was a very advanced formation. He did not expect someone in the Ji dynasty to have such a high level of formation cultivation. He should not be underestimated. He thought about it and gave up on the idea of asking his master for help. Master was worried about his safety, so he came over as soon as he came out of isolated cultivation. He made an exception and attacked Chu Li once. If he could not kill Chu Li, he would not attack again. He still had to rely on himself to kill Chu Li. Chu Li had been severely injured by his master. If he still could not kill him, he would be too ashamed to face his master. He thought for a moment, then disappeared. After a while, he returned, holding a formation-breaking talisman in his hand. This was something he had snatched from the experts of the Supreme Palace. It was priceless, and it was not easy for the Supreme Palace to refine it. The blood-red formation-destroying talisman flew into the air. He bit his index finger and flung out a drop of blood. The droplet of blood flew onto the formation-breaking talisman and disappeared in an instant, just like how Chu Li disappeared into the formation. A blazing red light shot out in all directions. He couldn't help but close his eyes. When he opened them again, the red light had already spread out and condensed into a red cloud 100 meters away, like the sunset glow of the setting sun. The red light flickered for a moment before disappearing. He furrowed his brows. He had not sensed Chu Li's presence, and the formation-breaking talisman could not break this formation. Bang! He slammed a hole in the ground with his palm. He was furious and unwilling to give up. This was the best opportunity. From now on, Chu Li would never appear in the Li dynasty again. He had to go to the Ji dynasty to guard against his master's sneak attack. Without being able to sense him, it would be too difficult to catch him, so he could not miss this opportunity. Chu Li was almost dead. He had been hit by his master's blood jade palm, and there was no cure for it. Unless someone with a cultivation level higher than his master channeled to cleanse his body, he could only be saved. There were only 2 people in the Ji dynasty who had such a cultivation level, and they were both enlightened masters. Chu Li was hiding in the formation. Even if he did not attack, he was still slowly approaching death. It was a pity that he was not the one who did it. It was a pity and incomplete. When he thought of this, he sat cross-legged on the ground and waited for Chu Li to die. Inside the formation, Chu Li sat cross-legged on a rock. White steam was rising from the top of his head, and his face was rosy. He did not look injured at all. He was cautious and had set up many formations in the Fu dynasty. This time, he was in an emergency again. He desperately activated the Earth Matrix and Reincarnation Scripture and the Life and Death Scripture, healing his injuries while using spiritual energy to heal them. However, the injuries on his internal organs did not improve at all. His blood was corroding his organs like poison. His vision darkened, and his brain was being corroded by this strange force. Chu Li desperately tried to think of a way to save his life. The medicinal effect of the spirit blessing pill circulated in his organs, but it did not alleviate his injuries at all. It was as if nothing could stop his body from deteriorating and weakening. Chu Li secretly estimated that if this went on, he would die completely in an hour. He did not have time to find out how to restrain the blood jade palm. It was too vicious, but there was no invincible martial art in the world. There was always a way to restrain it. Unfortunately, he did not have the time to find out and cultivate it. Chu Li took a deep breath and made a prompt decision. He could only seek survival in the face of death. Spiritual energy surged from all directions and was quickly converted into the divine light technique's inner energy in his dantian. It surged violently in his body. He disappeared in a flash and appeared on Jade Guardian Island the next moment. As soon as he appeared on Jade Guardian Island, he spat out blood. His organs felt like they were cut into countless pieces, and there were even small pieces of flesh mixed in the blood. Shao Qi had sharp senses and was anxiously waiting on Jade Guardian Island. When she saw him, she quickly went forward to support him. Chu Li's face looked as if it was covered with gold powder. His body went limp as he supported Shao Qi. Tell everyone in the High Duke's public house to return to the residence. They're not allowed to leave. Wait for me to wake up. As he spoke, blood was still gushing out. The void energy was unparalleled. Even with the protection of the divine light technique, his injuries were worsened. His organs were shattered, and there was no way to save him. He was definitely going to die. Shao Qi quickly channeled to help him heal but realized that his inner energy was surging violently. Her fingers that were pressing on his wrist were bounced off and felt slightly numb. He had such a vast inner energy, but his body was filled with an aura of death. Shao Qi's heart raced and she was flustered, unlike her usual calm self. What happened? Shao Qi asked. Chu Li said, "Send me to the Glories Will courtyard." Shao Qi quickly carried him and flew towards the Glories Will courtyard. Chu Li's eyes were bright, which was different from his golden complexion. He was full of vitality. I was ambushed by the bishop of the Church of the Divine Blood in the Fu dynasty. I'm being chased by Wei Wuwei. Wei Wuwei might come here to force me to show myself. He can sense my location. He'll come after you? Very well. Shao Qi bit her red lips and said coldly. Her bright eyes flashed with coldness, and her killing intent boiled. Chu Li shook his head. Don't worry about him for now. When I wake up, I'll settle the score with him. Tell everyone to retreat to the High Duke's public house to avoid unnecessary losses. Okay. Shao-Chi nodded. The two entered the Glory's Will courtyard. Xue Ling, who was dressed in a white tunic, came to greet them. When she saw Chu Li's strange behavior, her expression changed. Don't make a fuss. Chu Li waved his hand and smiled. With the help of Shao-Chi and Xue Ling, he sat cross-legged under the Glory's Will tree. He formed a hand seal, and a huge tree of life and death appeared in the void of his mind. Don't worry, I'll be back. Chu Li smiled at Shao-Chi and Xue Ling before he closed his eyes and passed away. P.S. Update complete. Chapter 3260. He hadn't been in a good state for the past 2 months. In November, he went to the author's salon. After he came back, he repeatedly fell sick and couldn't go. He realized that his writing was getting worse and worse. In his anxiety, he could only calm himself down and not let himself be eager for quick success. He slowed down and adjusted himself so that his writing wouldn't get worse. Unfortunately, the effect wasn't good. Sometimes it was like this. You couldn't do things well just by putting your heart into it. Because he didn't write much, he couldn't open his mouth to ask for monthly vote. Even if he did ask for votes, he would only mention it secretly. He didn't dare to ask for votes on his own. But as the number of monthly votes decreased, he realized that he was getting less and less motivated. Without the motivation and stimulation of monthly votes, he couldn't burst out with enthusiasm. He couldn't go on like this. It was time to pursue monthly votes again. Writing was never the job of the author alone. It was like performing crosstalk on stage. It was hard to be motivated if there was no applause from the audience. So, bosses, please let me see your support. Let the enthusiasm return to me. Throw your monthly votes at me. Give me the motivation to write with all my might. Chapter 3261. Shao-Chi pursed her lips and stared at Chu Li without moving. Xue stepped forward to check Chu Li's breathing. Tears streamed down her cheeks and dripped into the spirit soil before disappearing. Shao-Chi stared at Chu Li and sighed. If he said he'll come back, he'll wake up. Xue wiped her tears and nodded. Shao-Chi turned her head and said calmly, Guard here and don't let anyone come near. Yes. Xue nodded and stared at Chu Li without blinking. She hoped that he would open his eyes and smile at her. Shao-Chi returned to Symphony Island first. Xiao Shi was reading in the house. Both of them planned to go to Spirit Crane's Peak to cultivate in seclusion, but this happened before they left. Shao-Chi felt that she could not hide it anymore. Xiao Shi was shocked. He's dead? Shao-Chi shook her head. He has the ability to revive the dead. He'll wake up. That's true. He won't die. Xiao Shi nodded. She was confident in Chu Li. He was able to escape unscathed after encountering so many difficulties. Now that he had such powerful martial arts, it was even more impossible for him to die. Then I'll guard him too. Xiao Shi said, Let's see when he'll wake up. Shao-Chi nodded and brought her to Glory's Will courtyard. She then found Xiao Taiying and used the High Duke's order to send a message. All protectors of the public house were to return to the public house within 2 days. No protectors could disobey the High Duke's order. Wei Wuwei quietly waited outside the formation. He stared for a day and thought that Chu Li should be dead. He could not withstand Master's blood jade palm. Such a powerful master could be said to be the first person below the Ji dynasty's enlightened master. Yet, he died without a sound. He was happy but also a little regretful. He felt that he should find Chu Li's body and cut his head off. Only by cutting off his head would it be considered a true death. He walked around for a day and still could not find the existence of the formation. He was very unwilling to give up. This formation was really brilliant. He wondered which powerful person from the Ji dynasty set it up. He decided to break the formation and find Chu Li. He disappeared in a flash. After a while, He reappeared with 2 formation-breaking talismans and threw them into the air. 2 drops of blood landed on the formation-breaking talismans and disappeared in the blink of an eye. A dazzling red light shot out in all directions, condensing into a red cloud in the distance. The red cloud flickered with light, as if it was about to come to life. Pop! Like the sound of a pebble being thrown into a lake, the red cloud spread out in an instant, like a rising tide slowly spreading on the beach, spreading into the distance and disappearing. Suddenly, the scenery in front of him changed greatly. The originally flat forest turned out to be a towering and lonely mountain peak. The mountain peak was overgrown with green bamboos, and when a gust of wind blew, the green waves surged. It was a very spectacular sight. Wei Wuwei had no time to admire this beautiful scenery. Like a wisp of smoke, he circled around the mountain peak from bottom to top. Finally, he stopped somewhere in the bamboo forest and stared at the blackened blood on the ground. He bent down and reached out his hand to wipe the black blood soil. Then, he gently sniffed it and felt the aura of the blood jade palm. With this kind of blood, Chu Li would definitely die. It was even more poisonous than the deadliest poison. He squinted his eyes and sensed for a moment. He got up and looked around. Chu Li should not be in this mountain. Even if he was dead, the aura of the blood jade palm in the blood would not dissipate. He could still feel it. It seemed like Chu Li had escaped. He frowned and pondered. He was annoyed. How could he survive after being hit by Master's blood jade palm? After a while, he left the mountain and walked east like a wisp of smoke, entering the Ji dynasty. He had been desperately cultivating. Even when he left the mountain, he only wandered in the martial arts world of the Fu dynasty and made a name for himself. As for the Ji dynasty, he did not care about it. He was too lazy to step foot there. This was the first time he stepped into the Ji dynasty. He asked someone about the location of the public house. Then, he used his light body technique to travel quickly. He wanted to rush to the public house as soon as possible to see if Chu Li was dead. If he was not dead, he would kill him before he recovered. In the evening, he entered a restaurant in Green Mountain Town. Green Mountain Town was where the Ren public house was. He was passing by, but he also wanted to take a look at the Ren public house. He wanted to find out the situation of the Ji public house, so that he could calmly deal with the public house. After a day's journey, he was hungry and thirsty. So, he found a bustling restaurant and sat at a table on the second floor. He called the waiter and ordered some dishes. Then, he drank and listened to the people talking. "I heard that the young lady has returned to the public house," a young man in martial arts attire said excitedly. There were 3 other young men in martial arts attire sitting at the table. They had swords on their waists and their eyes were shining. "The young lady has been staying in Fairy's capital for a while. It was not easy for her to return to the public house." Another young man shook his head and sighed. "Women are not inferior to men. The young lady is now the commander of the Secret Guardians Hall. She is really amazing." "Exactly," a horse-faced young man said proudly. "She has firmly suppressed Chu Li. Back then, Chu Li was only a centurion. The public house was so arrogant and arrogant. Now, they have embarrassed themselves." Haha, once the young lady became the commander, Chu Li was immediately kicked out of the Secret Guardians Hall. How delightful! Delightful. They should have kicked Chu Li out. Chu Li is now suppressed by the young lady. He can only stay in the imperial residence obediently and cultivate in isolation all year round. He must be unsatisfied and wants to suppress the young lady. Exactly. Everyone was discussing. Their words were all about the young lady suppressing Chu Li, and Chu Li could not turn the tables. Wei Wuwei listened with great interest. There was actually a woman who could suppress Chu Li? He really wanted to see for himself. He got up and came to the table. He closed fist saluted and smiled. "My surname is Wei. May I know which young lady the 4 of you are talking about?" The four of them saw that he was elegant and dignified. It was obvious that he was a person of high status. They did not dare to neglect him. One of them smiled and said, "The young lady is naturally the young lady of the Ren public house." Another person said, "Lu on the top and Yurong on the bottom. Is this Miss Lu that powerful?" Wei Wu Wei smiled. "Can she defeat Chu Li?" "Of course." The four of them nodded. Not only is the young lady skilled in martial arts, but she is also wise. Although Chu Li is a man, he was completely restrained and could not turn the tables. Back then, under the leadership of the young lady, our Ren public house defeated the E public house. If we did not show mercy, we would have been defeated long ago. This Miss Lu's martial arts is also better than Chu Li's. Wei Wu Wei frowned. "That's impossible, right?" These words made the four of them a little unhappy. They frowned and looked at him. "Young Master Wei, who are you and what is your relationship with Chu Li?" Wei Wu Wei said, "I'm friends with Chu Li." "Chu Li's friends?" The four of them stared at him with gloomy faces. "That makes him our enemy." Wei Wu Wei smiled indifferently. He shook his head and did not say anything. "If you don't want to say, then forget it. But I still think that it is impossible for this Miss Lu to defeat Chu Li. Chu Li's martial arts is very powerful." "Shut up!" The four of them shouted. They pointed at him and scolded. "Which corner did you crawl out from? You're full of nonsense. Get out!" Wei Wu Wei's face suddenly darkened. The murderous aura around him was faintly discernible, and the surrounding temperature suddenly dropped. Chapter 3262. "Stop!" A loud voice boomed like thunder. Everyone could only hear the roar in their ears. They felt like vomiting and swayed unsteadily. Everything in front of them was shaking and they could not see clearly. Two dark green silhouettes shot into the restaurant and stood in front of Wei Wu Wei. They stared at him with their hands on their swords. "Who are you?" Wei Wu Wei frowned and waved his hand impatiently. He wanted to see if Fa Ming was dead or alive. If he attacked, he would definitely kill him. "How dare you!" The two middle-aged men in green stepped forward and took two positions. They slowly drew their swords. Fighting is prohibited in Green Mountain Town. Anyone who violates the rules will be killed. "How arrogant!" Wei Wu Wei said coldly. He disappeared in a flash, and the next moment, he flew out of the window and landed on the street outside. The street was brightly lit with lanterns everywhere. It was bustling with people coming and going. Everyone stopped in their tracks and looked at Fa Ming, who was slowly getting up. There was blood at the corner of his mouth, and he was seriously injured. The blood jade palm was powerful. Although Fa Ming was a grandmaster and could protect himself in the Ji dynasty, he could not withstand Wei Wu Wei's palm. "You do have some ability." Wei Wu Wei's purple robe fluttered as he landed in front of Fa Ming. There were not many people in the world who could take a hit from him and not die. Fa Ming's cultivation level was average, but he had some ability to take a beating. "I am a disciple of the Tempest Temple. I have cultivated the sentient menace," Fa Ming said slowly. His face shone with a golden light. He looked solemn and holy, like a golden Luhan standing there. He felt Wei Wu Wei's murderous intent and knew he could not escape. He immediately activated his secret skill. The Tempest Temple's disciple must die too. Wei Wu Wei shouted and struck with his palm. "Stop!" Ding! Ding! The two middle-aged men appeared in front of Fa Ming and brandished their sabers to block Wei Wu Wei's palm. However, their sabers were sent flying, and their expressions changed drastically. They quickly retreated, wanting to escape. They could feel Wei Wu Wei's violent internal energy, and they knew that they were no match for him. Furthermore, Wei Wu Wei was a ruthless and merciless killer. Only by dodging could they preserve their lives. "You dare to meddle in my business? Die!" Wei Wu Wei disappeared in a flash and caught up to the two. His left and right palms struck their chest. The two of them faced upwards and spurted out arrows of blood. They flew 100 feet away and crashed into a wonton stall. They lay motionless on the ground, dead. Fa Ming turned around and ran. He was like a streak of golden light that flashed in front of everyone. In the blink of an eye, he had run more than 100 meters away. He turned at the end of the street. Everyone watched with wide eyes, hoping that Fa Ming would be able to escape from this killing god. Wei Wuwei took a step forward, blocking Fa Ming's path. Ah, me. Tua. Buddha. Fa Ming chanted the name of Buddha and slowly pushed out his palm. This Buddhist chant was mighty and mighty, echoing in the night sky for a long time. It was as if all the Buddhas in the sky were chanting Buddhist chants, solemn and dignified. Bang! Fa Ming's palm, which seemed to be covered in gold powder, collided with Wei Wuwei's white, jade-like palm, producing a muffled sound. The surrounding people were all sent flying like a hurricane. The dirt and fruit pits on the ground were all swept up, and the green brick floor was completely clean. Fa Ming did not move. His face shone with a golden radiance, and blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth. Amit Bao. He put his hands together and sat cross-legged on the ground, chanting the name of Buddha again. His voice became weaker and weaker until it finally stopped moving. He had already passed away. Wei Wuwei sneered, very dissatisfied with Fa Ming's actions. The surrounding people couldn't help but feel deep veneration. This little monk was so young, but he had the demeanor of an eminent monk. He was indeed worthy of being a great disciple of the great Thunder Tune Temple. It was a pity that the heavens didn't give him a false year, and he actually passed away here. They couldn't help but angrily glare at Wei Wuwei. Wei Wuwei faced the fiery gazes of the crowd and smiled slightly. He felt indescribably comfortable. This was the kind of gaze he wanted, this was his dignity. He floated back into the restaurant through the broken window. The people who were looking down from the window couldn't help but shrink back, hurriedly avoiding him. Wei Wuwei calmly returned to his seat, picked up his wine cup and took a sip. Everyone was silent and didn't dare to talk. It had been a long time since they met such a madman. He must be someone who was going to die, and it wasn't worth arguing with him. It was better not to provoke him, and they didn't want to drag themselves down with him before he died. The entire restaurant fell into silence, and the sound of bowls and chopsticks colliding was especially ear-piercing. Wei Wuwei indifferently glanced at the crowd and slowly sipped his wine. Everyone avoided his eyes, and no one stood up to leave. They wanted to see this guy's ending. After Wei Wuwei finished his wine cup, there was a sudden sound of clothes fluttering, and 6 elders appeared in the restaurant. They were all wearing dark green robes, and some had sabers and some had swords. They went forward and surrounded Wei Wuwei. Go! They didn't say a word and brandished their sabers and swords at Wei Wuwei. The saber lights and sword shadows emitted a cold aura, and everyone retreated to the corner to watch the show. Ding, 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 ding! Bang, 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 bang! The 6 elders flew out one after another, smashed through the window, and fell onto the street, dead on the spot. Wei Wuwei lightly brushed his purple robe and calmly said, "Waiter, why aren't the dishes here yet?" "They're coming, they're coming." The waiter, who was hiding in the distance, trembled in fear, and hurriedly stuttered. "Hurry up," Wei Wuwei said in a low voice. "Yes, yes, they'll be ready soon." The waiter's face was pale. The surrounding people left one after another, and their hearts were heavy. They felt that the world was about to change. This crazy guy was so powerful, and this time, the House of High Dukes might not be able to kill him. If they couldn't, then the rules of Green Mountain Town would be broken, and the prestige of the House of High Dukes would be gone. In the future, Green Mountain Town would not be so peaceful. Wei Wuwei looked at the empty restaurant, laughed softly, and shook his head. A remote and desolate place was a remote and desolate place, and there were limited masters. As long as the 2 enlightened masters did not appear, he would be invincible. He felt indescribably carefree. He looked at the waiter who bit the bullet and brought the dishes over, and lightly said, "Don't worry, I'm not crazy, and I won't kill people for no reason." Yes. When the waiter heard him speak, he was shocked, but after listening to his words, he tried to squeeze a smile, carefully put down the 4 dishes, and hurriedly left. Wei Wuwei stared at the 4 dishes, shook his head, and began to eat. After that, no more masters came. The Ren public house seemed to be so scared that they shrank back, which made Wei Wuwei despise them even more. He felt that they were strong in appearance, but weak in heart, bullying the weak and afraid of the strong. The House of High Dukes was only SOSO. After the meal, he was too lazy to explore the Ren public house. He directly passed through Green Mountain Town and walked towards the E-public house. The E-public house was not worth mentioning at all. He could just kill his way to their door and kill Chuli. Along the way, no one followed him. It seemed that the Ren public house was really scared, and the Tempest Temple did not respond, which made him vigilant. The House of High Dukes had lost a few grandmasters, and their vitality was greatly damaged, so it was understandable that they did not dare to chase after him. Otherwise, if all the masters were killed, the big House of High Dukes would be finished, and they could only endure the humiliation. The Tempest Temple was the #1 sect in the Great Ji dynasty, so they would definitely not swallow their anger and send people to kill him. Chapter 3263. As the sun set, the entire field was dyed red. Lu Yurong's face was covered by a white veil, revealing only her clear eyes. She looked around, her white robe fluttering in the wind as she said, "Fa Yuan, your junior brother Fa Ming was also a powerful figure. It's a pity that he was killed just like that." Fa Yuan's gray robe fluttered as he sighed. "Junior Fa Ming's dermic base is profound. I didn't expect this to happen and enter the Grandmaster's boundary so quickly." Lu Yurong chuckled. "He's a rising star. He won't surpass you, right?" "It's highly possible," Fa Yuan nodded slowly. His handsome face turned solemn. He suddenly stopped in the distance and saw Wei Wuwei, who was resting by the side of the forest. Lu Yurong asked, "Did you find out who he is?" "These are the masters that I've borrowed from the other public houses." She turned her head to look at the 20 or so elders that she had brought with her. She shook her head and sighed. "If we still can't take him down with so many grandmasters, the reputation of the public houses will be completely gone. The death of 7 grandmasters has indeed damaged the House of High Dukes' vitality." She has directly contacted the other House of High Dukes to ask for emergency help and deployment. Everything is predestined, there is a cause and effect. This is Junior Fa Ming's fate, but we have to help him. "All right," Xueling closed fist saluted and left. Fa Yuan looked away from Xueling's graceful figure and looked at Wei Wuwei in the distance. Lu Yurong said, "Fa Yuan, let's not let them fight. Let's work together and use our secret skills. If we can't win, we'll run into Chongming Town and let the E-public house protect us." Fa Yuan smiled. "Miss Lu is forcing Chuli to come out of isolation?" "Humph, he might be watching us make a fool of ourselves," Lu Yurong scoffed. Fa Yuan shook his head and smiled. "Chuli won't do that." "That might not be the case," Lu Yurong said. "He'll only come out at the crucial moment and turn the tide." Fa Yuan laughed and nodded slowly as he stared into the distance. "Then let's meet this young leader." Lu Yurong nodded lightly. Suddenly, a bright light flashed in the sky and fell instantly, entering her by Hui acupuncture point. Her body was suddenly covered in a layer of light, as if she was standing by the lake and being reflected by the clear water. Fa Yuan put his palms together and chanted, Amit Ba. When the Buddha's name fell, he was already solemn and dignified. His face began to flicker with a purple brilliance, and his gaze became calm, compassionate, and peaceful. It was as if an Arhat had descended to the world. His whole body seemed to be cast from purple copper, without the appearance of flesh and blood. The two flashed like a wisp of flowing light and instantly arrived in front of Wei Wuwei. Wei Wuwei's eyes were sharp, and his ears were also very sharp. He heard what they were saying. Facing the two of them, he laughed loudly and stepped forward. Purring, 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 purring. He dealt with one person with one hand, and the muffled sounds of collisions rang out incessantly. The three of them were fighting each other head-on, and there wasn't the slightest bit of trickery involved. It was all about cultivation. Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan both used their secret skills, but Wei Wuwei did not use any secret skills, yet he was still able to firmly suppress the two of them. The blood jade palm was extremely strong, it continuously eroded the internal organs of the two, but the two of them were in the state of secret skills, they were extremely strong, they had a strong resistance against the blood jade palm, although they were injured, they were only minor injuries. Chapter 3264. As soon as he finished speaking, his jade-white palms turned red again, as if they were smeared with a layer of rouge. His power suddenly increased. As his jade-white palms turned red, his speed and power increased greatly. Suddenly, the two of them could not breathe. They kept retreating until they were in front of the 20 masters. Among the 20 masters, 6 were monks in grey robes, while the other 14 were elders. When they saw that Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan were still being suppressed, they could not help but come forward to help. Bam 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 bam. As they rushed forward, they were sent flying by Wei Wuwei's palm energy. It was like an innate master meeting a grandmaster. They could not resist at all. After flying out, they staggered and landed on the ground. Blood flowed from their mouth. They were injured. Lu Yurong shouted, "All of you, return to Chongming Town and the House of High Duke." Yes. Everyone nodded helplessly. They were a little disheartened. They thought that they could help, but once they fought, they realized that Wei Wuwei lived up to his name. They could not even take one hit. They were too weak and could not help at all. Fa Yuan also said, "Brother Fa Hua, all of you should go too." Ba. The 6 monks put their palms together and chanted. All of a sudden, golden rays shot out from their faces. Following that, the golden rays slowly spread out and covered their entire bodies like golden powder. Their hands, feet, faces, and necks seemed to have been coated with golden powder as they transformed into golden arhat. Fa Yuan shook his head helplessly. The 6 monks rushed forward again to meet Wei Wuwei's blood jade palms. Bam 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 bam, they were sent flying again. They staggered 100 feet away and landed on the ground. Blood flowed from the corners of their mouth. Although they were injured, it did not affect their combat power. Fa Yuan sighed, "Brother Fa Hua." The 6 monks floated forward again. In the air, they pressed their palms together like a circle. Then, they spread out violently and turned into a golden circle that enveloped Wei Wuwei. Wei Wuwei scoffed and suddenly leaped up to meet the golden circle. His palms struck out. Bam 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 bam. The 6 spun violently and met his palms one by one. The golden circle expanded for a moment before shrinking back and continuing to trap him. Wei Wuwei frowned. After he floated down to the ground, the 6 of them floated down as well and continuously struck out with their palms. Wei Wuwei could see the secret behind it. The cultivation bases of the 6 of them had already merged into one, and their bodies were incomparably strong, as if they were not made of flesh and blood. The destructive power of the blood jade palm was limited when it entered their bodies, and it was actually able to entangle him for a while. Fa Yuan stood outside the circle and waved both his hands. Streaks of petrifying finger strikes were mixed with the spear finger strike. Lu Yurong, on the other hand, stood at the side with a frown, trying to find Wei Wuwei's weakness. However, Wei possessed a wondrous art, but she couldn't do anything to Wei Wuwei because of her cultivation. This made her feel a sense of despair, and she kept thinking of retreating. This Wei Wuwei was simply a monster, and she couldn't defeat him no matter what. Bam 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 bam, the 6 monks suddenly flew out. The circle that had been formed was finally forcefully broken by Wei Wuwei. The 6 of them fell to the ground and could not get up. Their injuries were too severe. Wei Wuwei laughed loudly. What a great Tempest Temple, you have some skills, but unfortunately, this is all you've got. Amitabha Buddha. Fa Yuan slowly chanted the name of Buddha and pounced forward again. The corner of his mouth was gushing with blood, and he was unknowingly injured. The blood jade palm was extremely insidious, and even if Fa Yuan activated his secret skill, he still could not escape. Lu Yurong's face was covered with a white veil, and no blood could be seen. Her movements were no longer as fast as before. Although the Empyrean fairy power was amazing, her cultivation level was still a lot lower than Wei Wuwei's. It was already very rare that she could last until now. The 3 of them fought again. Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan tried their best to hold on, but they could be crushed at any time. They could retreat to Chongming Town and hide in the public house. Unknowingly, they had been forced to retreat to the south gate of Chongming Town. They turned their heads to look at the south gate, and suddenly gritted their teeth and forced themselves to stop retreating. Xue Ling and Xiao Shi sat in front of the Glory's Will Tree, and stared at Chu Li without blinking. Chu Li was like a statue, sitting cross-legged, without a trace of breath, as if he was completely dead. The 2 women firmly believed that Chu Li could come back from the dead, and stared at him, wanting to see the moment he came back from the dead, and how he would come back to life. Xiao Qi had been helping Xiao Taiying with the public house's matters. All the protectors of the public house had returned. It was an order from the High Duke, so all the protectors wanted to know what happened. They soon found out about what happened in Green Mountain Town, and what happened outside Chongming Town. They were all angry and wanted to help. The E public house and the Run public house had a grudge, but they were both public houses, and the rules of the public house could not be broken. This Wei Wuwei must be killed, or else the dignity of the public house would be destroyed. However, this Wei Wuwei was so arrogant, and killed his way into Chongming Town. It was obvious that he wanted to break into the public house. The public house summoned all the protectors back because they were afraid that they would encounter Wei Wuwei and be killed. This made them feel touched and angry. Chu Li's soul was lodged in a strange space, on a tree of life and death. It was as if he had transformed into a scripture of life and death, rooted in a strange place between heaven and earth, looking down at the changes of the world. The sea turned into mulberry fields, and everything was changing. There was nothing that was eternal, and everything was going through the process of life and death, and then back to life again. The cycle of life and death, the cycle of life and death, the changes of life and death. When he slowly woke up, he felt that he had experienced hundreds of years, and his state of mind had become calm and vicissitudes. He was not like a young man, but more like an old man who had lived for hundreds of years. When he opened his eyes, everything he saw was indescribably beautiful and lovely, especially when there were 2 beautiful women in front of him. "Master!" Xue Ling called out in surprise. Chu Li smiled, but he did not remove the hand seal, and remained sitting cross-legged. His chest suddenly became bright, as if there was a white light hidden under his clothes, illuminating his body and clothes. This white light slowly rose, as if there was an invisible hand lifting the light into the air. At this moment, it could be seen that this white light was emitted by a string of prayer beads, and this string of prayer beads was the one that Chu Li obtained from the stargazing pavilion. It looked ragged, and there was one missing. The string of prayer beads could break at any time. He originally wanted to change the string of prayer beads and string it again, but his intuition stopped him. It seemed that this string that was about to break was extremely important to the prayer beads, so he could not change it. Therefore, he did not change it. This way, the prayer beads were not suitable to be worn on his hand, so he could only wrap them up and keep them in his arms. At this moment, this string of prayer beads turned into a ball of light, and slowly rose into the air. It stopped moving, like a bright moon hanging low. Xue Ling and Xiao Shi stared at this ball of light. After a while, the prayer beads were still hanging in the air. Xue Ling regained her senses and quickly went to get the porridge. Chu Li closed his eyes and chanted softly, as if he did not see the abnormality of the prayer beads. Chapter 3265. Time passed by slowly. Chu Li sat under the tree with his palms pressed together as he chanted Buddhist scriptures. He had no intention of getting up. It was as if he was going to sit there forever. Xue Ling looked at him worriedly and turned to look at Xiao Shi. Xiao Shi shook her head. "Don't disturb him." "What's wrong with Master?" Xue Ling asked softly. Xiao Shi shook her head. She did not know why, but she knew that she should not disturb him. It was not a bad thing to look at Chu Li's appearance. It was rare to see such an unusual phenomenon. She had never seen such a phenomenon before. Xue Ling said, "Does Master need help? He seems to be resisting something." She could see that Chu Li was not at ease. Although his eyes were closed and his face was solemn, she could see the seriousness in his brows. He might be going through some difficulties and needed their help. However, the second lady did not want to disturb him. They might miss the opportunity and put Master in danger. At this moment, the sound of clothes fluttering could be heard. She quickly turned her head and saw Xiao Qi floating over. She stared at Chu Li. "He is the commander of the Secret Guardians Hall. He has the power to rule the world." Then why did she come to the public house? I know. Someone quickly came forward and said in a low voice, "I heard that the person she's fighting with has killed someone in Green Hill Town." Think about it, killing someone in Green Hill Town is no different from killing someone in our Chongming Town. The High Duke's public house won't forgive him, they must kill him. Wow, how dare he kill someone in Green Hill Town? Nothing is too strange in this big world. An old man shook his head and sighed, but this person has the ability to do whatever he wants. His martial arts is too strong. Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan are the top masters in the martial arts world. Other than Du Feng of the south and Chu Li of the north, they are the top masters. Where is Chief Chu? A young swordsman frowned and scoffed. The fight is at his doorstep and Chief Chu is not coming out. I heard that Chief Chu has been in isolated cultivation. Could he be afraid to come out? Another young swordsman sneered. I know the identity of the person who is fighting 1 against 2. Who? Almost 100 people looked over. More and more people gathered around them. Most of them came from Chongming Town to watch the show. They stared at the scene and whispered to each other. The young leader of the Church of the Divine Blood, Wei Wuwei. The young swordsman said coldly, "He's one of the top experts in the Fu dynasty's martial arts world. He rarely has a worthy opponent." The Divine Blood Church of the Fu dynasty? Some of the people in the crowd were confused, while others' expressions changed slightly. The young bladesman snorted. Wei Wuwei appeared, so it's understandable that Chief Manager Chu didn't come out. Shut up! The young swordsman shouted. Don't you dare slander Chief Chu! Whether it's slander or not, we'll know at a glance. The young swordsman sneered and said, We've already fought to this point. I don't believe that head Chief Chu hasn't heard the news. Also, look, where are the protectors of the public house? Aren't they all cowering like turtles? No one was able to refute his words, and their expressions turned ugly. The outskirts of Chongming Town was so lively, yet none of the protectors of the public house had appeared. It was really unusual. No matter how one looked at it, they were afraid. Moreover, Chief Chu should have heard the news and rushed over, yet he did not appear. He said that he was in isolated cultivation, so it was obvious that he wanted to avoid Wei Wuwei. Wei Wuwei's identity was indeed extraordinary, so it was understandable, but he still felt uncomfortable. We're here. A long shout suddenly came from afar, and a group of people rushed over like a gust of wind. When they arrived behind Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan, it was more than 40 martial arts masters. All of their eyes were shining and their aura was released. One look and anyone could tell that they were martial arts masters. Lu Yurong turned her head to look and waved her hand as she said, "All of you, go to the public house, don't do anything." The old man at the front of the crowd said, "Miss Lu, how can we let this person do as he pleases? Everyone, let's attack together." "Yes, let's attack together," the 42 martial arts masters behind him said. The old man had white hair and a ruddy complexion. He had a round and pale face, and was plump and amiable. At that moment, he said with a sullen face, "Miss Lu, don't worry, the 12 public houses are united, we will not let others trample on the rules." They were the grandmasters from the other public houses. After Lu Yurong sent out the letter asking for help, the other public houses sent their martial arts masters, but some were far away and some were close. These people had just arrived. Chapter 3266. They sent more than 10 people to heal the masters who were sitting on the ground. "Why don't I see anyone from the public house? Are they just hiding behind us and letting us fight for our lives?" scoffed the round-faced elder. Lu Yurong sighed faintly. "They're smart enough to hide in the High Duke's public house." "Damn it." The round-faced elder's face darkened. Fa Yuan secretly shook his head. He was not happy with Lu Yurong's methods. He slowly said, "Ba, almsgiver Lu, everyone from the public house retreated to the public house to defend themselves. They were afraid that Wei Wuwei would break into the public house. He's here for brother Chu Li. Wei Wuwei wants to kill Chu Li." The round-faced elder, Lu Qi, was surprised. "Yes," said Fa Yuan. "Haha," Wei Wuwei suddenly laughed out loud and snorted coldly, "I'm indeed here to kill Chu Li, but all of you insist on stopping me and suffering for him. He's heavily injured now, and his life is in danger. Why waste your energy?" He was very dissatisfied with the cold shoulder he received. He originally maintained the stalemate to wait for the two's secret skill to dissipate. When that time came, he would be at his mercy. However, he could not stand their contempt. If he did not show his power, they would think that he was easy to talk to. Ba, Fa Yuan suddenly realized and said, "Then all the more we have to stop almsgiver Wei." "Ridiculous." Wei Wuwei shook his head. "Wei Wuwei, this is not the Fu dynasty. It's not a place for you to act like a tyrant," Lu Qi shouted. Wei Wuwei's hands were still attacking the two. He turned to look at Lu Qi and shook his head. "Such arrogance. Not to mention this is the Ji dynasty, even if it's the Fu dynasty, who can stop me?" "Not necessarily," Lu Qi scoffed. Wei Wuwei suddenly disappeared from the spot and appeared behind Lu Qi in the next moment. He slapped him away. Bam 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 bam. He was like a wolf in a flock of sheep. His movements were extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he slapped 4 people away. Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan hurriedly went forward to block him. Everyone was shocked and could not help but retreat. They saw the people who flew out spitting out arrows of blood and fell to the ground, unable to get up. They were angry and shocked, their hearts trembled. Lu Yurong shouted, "Everyone, let's go to the public house first." Lu Qi sat cross-legged on the ground, took out a jade bottle and swallowed a spirit pill, then said in a hoarse voice, "Miss Lu, we must kill him even if we have to risk our lives. We can't allow him to act presumptuously in our public house's territory." "Elder Lu," Lu Yurong snapped, "this is not the time to let your emotions affect your decisions. You should learn from Chu Li and preserve your strength. Grandmasters like them would not be able to stop Wei Wuwei at all. Fighting Wei Wuwei would be suicide, and she did not want them to die in vain." Once the High Duke's public house's strength was greatly damaged, the consequences would be unpredictable. Those martial arts sects that were suppressed would definitely take the opportunity to create chaos, and the entire Great Ji dynasty would be in chaos. Miss Lu. Fa Yuan shook his head and smiled bitterly. Brother Chu was forced to do so. It's understandable that he needs someone to protect him and heal him. Humph. Lu Yurong rolled her eyes at him and shouted, Elder Lu, step back. Lu Qi shook his head. He looked amiable and easygoing, but he would not waver once he set his mind on something. Even if he had to die today, he would kill Wei Wuwei. Unfortunately, Wei Wuwei lived up to his reputation. He was truly terrifying. If they wanted to kill him, they would probably all die today. Even so, he would not turn back, because he had too much hatred for the Fu dynasty. All right, I'll fulfill your wish. Wei Wuwei laughed out loud. His body suddenly disappeared and once again, he sent 6 grandmasters flying. After Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan caught up to him, they tangled with each other for more than 10 times. Once again, he used the same method and sent the remaining grandmasters flying. For a moment, none of the masters were left standing. The people who were watching the battle from afar showed anger and fear. This Wei Wuwei was too terrifying. No one could stop him. Chu Li squinted his eyes and looked up at the Buddha beads above his head. A force entered the void of his mind from between his eyebrows. He heard the chanting of an old Buddha. The voice was calm and peaceful, as if it was trying to convert him to Buddhism. Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture kept circulating as he chanted the scripture in his mouth. He resisted the influence of the turbulent Peng Hu Lake. The Buddhist power contained in the Buddha beads was really strange. While he was absorbing it, he was also shaken by it and changed his mind. He wanted to become a Buddhist disciple, convert to Buddhism, and ignore the affairs of the world. Everything in the world was like floating clouds and dust. It was all an illusion and a dream. When he heard the chanting of the Buddha beads, it was as if he had woken up from a dream and finally saw everything in the world clearly. It was like dispelling the clouds and seeing the sky. From then on, he had the intention to leave the world. His cultivation would progress vigorously, but at the same time, he would abandon his family and friends. Chu Li resisted with Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture. He could not bear to leave this prosperous world. He had not fully enjoyed himself, so how could he enter a monastery to cultivate Buddhism? He did not want to completely cut off his mortal root. The 4 Buddhas and a demon were chanting in the void of his mind. At the same time, the bright moon in the sky became brighter and more flawless. The bright moon became brighter and brighter until it illuminated the entire void. It gradually became so dazzling that one could not look at it directly. In the end, it was as if the moon had turned into the sun. The void of his mind was bright and the 4 Buddhas and the demon were surrounded by thousands of rays of light. Amitabha. Chu Li suddenly chanted the name of Buddha. His voice spread out like a bronze bell. The Buddha beads floating above his head suddenly lit up and then dimmed. The Buddha beads turned into powder and fell into the spirit soil, making it difficult to distinguish. Chu Li slowly opened his eyes. His gaze was gentle and his eyes were like jade. He did not look aggressive at all. Instead, there was only gentleness and restraint, calmness and depth. Shao Qi and the other 2 ladies could not help but fall into his eyes. Ahem. Chu Li coughed softly and slowly got up. Young master. Xueling called out in surprise. Are you all right? Chu Li smiled and nodded. He looked at Shao Qi and Shao Shi. I've recovered. I knew you wouldn't die. Shao Shi smiled sweetly like a pearl. Shao Qi stared at him and pursed her red lips. Chu Li went forward and held Shao Qi's hand. He felt her trembling hand and smiled. Don't worry, I'm very tough. I won't die so easily. How's the situation outside? As he spoke, he examined himself and felt strange. After he absorbed the power of the Buddha beads, other than feeling the heaven and earth clearer and closer to him, there were no other changes. His cultivation level did not change, the life and death scripture did not seem to advance, and the earth matrix and reincarnation scripture and other scriptures did not strengthen. This power was really strange. He checked the omniscient mirror again. It was still 100 miles away and did not expand its range. Based on what he saw in the void of his mind, the omniscient mirror should have been strengthened. He guessed that the range should have expanded to 200 miles. However, it did not expand and was still 100 miles away. It was really strange. What's wrong? Shao-Chi could see that he was absent-minded. Chu-Li smiled and shook his head. He looked at Shao-Chi and the omniscient mirror was still operating. When it shone on her, he suddenly realized something. He could not help but smile. Let's go and take a look outside the city. Are you really okay? Shao-Chi grabbed his wrist and probed. Her fingers were instantly flicked away. The surging inner energy was endless and she could not see it. She rolled her eyes at Chu-Li and scoffed. It seems like there's no problem. Chapter 3267. It was dusk outside Chongming Town. Wei Wuwei was awe-inspiring. His attacks forced Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan to retreat step by step. Haha, the martial arts world of the Ji dynasty is just SOSO. Other than Chu-Li, there are no other masters. Wei Wuwei shook his head and laughed. Fall! He shouted. His eyes suddenly shot out a red light. His palm struck Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan's chests at lightning speed. Bang! Bang! Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan were both sent flying. They spat out a mouthful of blood in the air, and staggered a few steps after they landed on the ground. Lu Yurong's blood dyed her white veil red. She slowly took it off and threw it away, revealing her beautiful face. The people watching from afar started to talk about it. They were full of praise and pity. When they saw the previous situation, they already knew that this was the inevitable outcome. Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan, the two top-notch masters, were still no match for Wei Wuwei. This was probably the difference between the martial arts world of the Ji dynasty and the martial arts world of the Fu dynasty. Lu Yurong's jade-like face was as red as a drunkard's. She was beautiful and enchanting, but it was an abnormal, captivating red. She was already severely injured and could no longer fight. The blood jade palm's palm energy was still wreaking havoc, and her injuries were worsening. Fa Yuan's face flashed with golden light, flickering and flickering. He was also fighting against the blood jade palm's palm energy. Ha ha! Wei Wuwei laughed loudly and said in a clear voice, "Is there anyone who is unconvinced?" His gaze swept across the crowd in the distance, and looked at the dozens of people sitting on the ground. He shook his head and laughed. Just SOSO, just SOSO. You really disappoint me. Young sect master has come from afar. How can I disappoint young sect master? A chuckle was heard from within Chongming Town. Chu-Li's white robe fluttered in the wind as he slowly floated out of Chongming Town. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived in front of them. It's Chu-Li. Chief Chu. Chief Chu. He actually appeared. The people in the distance gasped in surprise. They did not expect Chu-Li to appear here. Chu-Li's white robe fluttered as he stood in the night breeze. He looked at Wei Wuwei, who was 10 meters away. How dare you, young bishop? He looked at Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan and nodded. Thank you for your hard work. He suddenly appeared behind them and patted their backs before returning to his original position. Everyone only felt their vision blur for a moment before everything returned to normal. It was as if Chu-Li had not moved at all. Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan heaved a long sigh of relief. His originally solid and domineering inner energy was swept away. Instantly, his vital energy flowed smoothly, and his inner energy gushed out endlessly, healing the injuries of his internal organs and preventing them from worsening. They had mixed feelings as they stared at Chu-Li with bright eyes. He did not expect Chu-Li's cultivation to have reached such a level. They were no longer on the same level. Chu-Li. Wei Wuwei narrowed his eyes and scanned Chu-Li. His eyes were bright as he scanned Chu-Li from top to bottom. His brows furrowed even more. Chu Li smiled and said, "Young cult leader, aren't you afraid of dying here? You really didn't die." Wei Wuwei said coldly. Chu Li smiled. "I've disappointed you, young bishop. Don't worry. Since you're not dead, I'll let you die." Wei Wuwei disappeared in a flash and appeared behind Chu Li in the next moment. Chu Li focused and felt that everything had slowed down. He placed his hand on the hilt of his sword, unsheathed it, and lightly stabbed. Wei Wuwei became transparent in his eyes. His gaze pierced through the bloody mist, and he could clearly see the meridians and internal energy flow of Wei Wuwei. He could clearly see the flaws in Wei Wuwei's moves, and he could clearly see the flaws in Wei Wuwei's moves and blood circulation. The tip of the sword broke through the obstruction of the bloody fog and pierced right through. It pierced into Wei Wuwei's body without any hindrance and went through his back. Wei Wuwei looked at Chu Li in shock. The two of them were very close. He did not expect to be stabbed by a sword, and it was Chu Li who did it. The next moment, he reacted and slapped Chu Li with his palm. Chu Li pulled out his sword and retreated. At the same time, he met the attack with his left hand. Bam! The two of them took a step back at the same time. Chu Li's earth matrix and reincarnation scripture dissolved the blood jade palm energy. He completely understood the mystery of absorbing the power of the Buddha bead. His soul energy suddenly strengthened. The omniscient mirror's observation range did not expand, but the intensity of observation increased greatly. He could already see through Shao Qi's mind and Wei Wuwei's mind. Even the inner energy flow in Wei Wuwei's body was clearly displayed in front of him. Wei Wuwei's treasured clothing was not the key point. The key point was that the bloody garment divine power was an extremely strong protective force that could counteract the inner energy on Chu Li's sword. Thus, it could not break the treasured clothing. The reason why Chu Li was able to succeed with his sword just now was because he had exploited the weakness of the bloody garment divine power. Thus, he was able to break the treasured clothing and injure Wei Wuwei. "You!" Wei Wuwei squinted his eyes. He felt that Chu Li was different. His cultivation level did not change, but he became more dangerous. His instincts were reminding him to leave and stay as far away from Chu Li as possible. He tapped his chest twice and the blood stopped flowing. The bloody garment divine power's control over the vital energy in the body was amazing. Everyone's eyes widened in disbelief. They looked at Chu Li, Lu Yurong, Fa Yuan, and then Wei Wuwei. They could not believe this scene. They had seen Wei Wuwei's strength clearly. They thought that the Ji dynasty would be humiliated again this time. They would be humiliated by Wei Wuwei, and would not be able to lift their heads. Chu Li had been severely injured by Wei Wuwei before, so he escaped to recover. The protectors of the public house also did not dare to come out. They did not expect Chu Li's first attack to succeed and injure Wei Wuwei. Chu Li gently shook his sword. Beads of blood rolled into the dust. The modesty sword's gray blade was not stained by a single drop of blood. He pointed his sword at Wei Wuwei. "Your master is not here. Leave your life here. I will send your head back to the Church of the Divine Blood." He stabbed with his sword as he finished speaking. Wei Wuwei sneered and struck with his palm. Ding! Like a jade plate, Chu Li's sword was knocked away. Wei Wuwei did not seem to be injured at all. He approached Chu Li again and struck with his palm toward Chu Li's chest. Chi! Chu Li suddenly took a step forward, twisted his wrist, and stabbed diagonally. The sword pierced through Wei Wuwei's waist from the left, the tip of the sword emerging from the right abdomen. Everyone felt that in front of Chu Li, Wei Wuwei was like a different person. He was clumsy, slow, and had no strength to resist. It was as if he was a different person from the Wei Wuwei who struck Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan like lightning. Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan's faces were solemn. They shook their heads. They knew that they would not be able to resist Chu Li's sword technique. They might not even last one move. It was truly terrifying. Chu Li pulled out his sword and retreated. He shook his head. Wei Wuwei, you are no match for me. Good, good. Wei Wuwei sealed the wound on his waist. His face was solemn. As expected of Chu Li. You have to be serious. A purple aura flashed across his face. His eyes shot out a red glow. Suddenly, he became blurry and instantly appeared 100 meters away. He was using the blood escape technique. Chu Li appeared one step earlier and stabbed Wei Wuwei's heart. His sword seemed to be waiting there, waiting for Wei Wuwei to appear and collide with him. Wei Wuwei really collided with the sword technique. He was stabbed in the heart. Chu Li pulled out his sword and said, "Although the martial arts world of the great Ji dynasty is weak, it is not that weak. Young bishop, you have underestimated us." Blood gushed out like a fountain. He took a step to the side to avoid it. Chapter 3268. Brother Chu, Fa Yuan said. Chu Li turned to look at her. Fa Yuan's gray robe fluttered as he took 2 steps towards him and bowed. Brother Chu, spare his life and let him go. Chu Li raised his eyebrows. Spare his life? Yes. Fa Yuan nodded slowly and looked at Wei Wuwei. I hope the young leader remembers this lesson and does not cause trouble in the great Ji dynasty. Wei Wuwei sneered. Monk, are you afraid of revenge? Fa Yuan said slowly, yes, if the young leader dies here, the Church of the Divine Blood will definitely take revenge. When that happens, who knows how many people will die. It's a sin. Monk, you're merciful. Lu Yurong floated over with a faint fragrance. She said coldly, let them fight then. Everyone dies. I'd like to see how the Church of the Divine Blood will take revenge. Fa Yuan shook his head. Miss Lu, the heavens are kind. Even if they want to take revenge, it will be on Brother Chu first. Lu Yurong rolled her eyes at him and scoffed. You're such a busybody. Wei Wuwei scoffed. Chu Li, I'll go back and cultivate in isolation. I'll come find you again. Do you dare to let me go? Chu Li frowned at him. Wei Wuwei said coldly, don't think that I'm afraid of death. I'm just not satisfied. Chu Li smiled. Since the young leader is not satisfied, I'll wait for you to come again. All right, we'll meet again someday. Wei Wuwei glanced at the people in the distance and looked at Fa Yuan and Lu Yurong. He appeared 100 meters away in a flash. Chu Li appeared at the same time and stabbed him in the heart again. You! Wei Wuwei's expression changed. Chu Li shook his head and smiled. It's impossible for the young leader to live. Rest in peace. The dark light of the sword slashed across Wei Wuwei's neck. His head fell to the ground but his body still stood straight. Amit Ba. Fa Yuan's expression was solemn as he chanted the name of Buddha. Good, good. Lu Yurong applauded. Chu Li sheathed his sword and looked at the head on the ground. He sighed. Fa Yuan stepped forward and chanted with his head lowered to release Wei Wuwei's soul. Lu Yurong came to Chu Li's side and smiled like a flower. Chu Li, I didn't think you would really dare to kill him. Chu Li shook his head. I won't kill him, but he wants to kill me. I'll kill him anyway. Why do I have to wait for another day? Wei Wuwei was a cold-blooded and emotionless person who killed without batting an eye. Moreover, from the way his master acted, it was clear that he had no bottom line. It was very likely that he would kill the people around him to disturb his mind. If he was spared, there would be endless troubles in the future. The people in the distance began to discuss. Crap, Wei Wuwei was really killed. What's so bad about it? This is so satisfying. Chu Li, you really live up to your name. You're indeed the Northern Chu Li. It's fun to kill, but what about the consequences? The Divine Blood Church will definitely retaliate. When that time comes, who can stop them? It's a little dangerous. Once the Church of the Divine Blood takes revenge, even if Chu Li has 3 heads and 6 arms and knows the cloning skill, he won't be able to stop them. If the public house is in trouble, the rest of the public houses will also be in trouble. It's very troublesome. Everyone agreed with this point of view. Through their discussion, they already knew Wei Wuwu Wei's identity and how powerful the Church of the Divine Blood was. It was one of the 8 major sects of the Fu dynasty. It was not something that the martial arts world of the Great Ji dynasty could handle. Wei Wuwu Wei died here, so the Church of the Divine Blood would definitely take revenge. The strength of the public house was tyrannical, but they only had about 10 or 20 grandmasters. However, sects like the Church of the Divine Blood probably had no less than 100 grandmasters. Moreover, their grandmasters were even stronger, far beyond the High Duke's public house. Even if these public houses joined forces, they might not be able to stop the Church of the Divine Blood. As long as the Church of the Divine Blood divided their forces, they would soon be able to break the alliance of the 12 public houses. Even if the public houses could stop them, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. When that time came, the world would be in chaos. Thinking of this, they could not help but worry. They felt that the world was about to change. After Fa Yuan finished chanting, he sighed and shook his head. From now on, the martial arts world is going to be troublesome. Ba. Chu Li said, "Monk, he's already dead. There's no point in saying more." Fa Yuan sighed. "Brother Chu, you're too reckless this time. You can't kill Wei Wuwu. He wanted to kill me, so of course I have to kill him." Chu Li shook his head. "Forget about the young bishop of the Church of the Divine Blood. Even the bishop must be killed." His heart was boiling with murderous intent. If it was not for the life and death scripture, he would have died a long time ago. Fa Yuan said, "Killing to your heart's content, but how will you deal with revenge? The public house against the Church of the Divine Blood is no different from a child against an adult. They can't even withstand a single blow." Lu Yurong scoffed. "The Ren public house will send masters over." She was worried that Chu Li would let Wei Wuwu go. If he could not kill Wei Wuwu, the prestige of the Ren public house would be gone. Green Mountain Town would no longer be a place where martial arts were forbidden. The Ren public house would no longer be able to control the sects in the martial arts world. Chu Li glanced at her. Lu Yurong said, "You don't have to owe me a favor this time. I owe you." Fa Yuan shook his head and laughed. This Miss Lu was very familiar with framing Chu Li. She spared no effort and dug a trap for Chu Li whenever she had the chance. It was rare for her to take the initiative to help him. Miss Lu still saw the big picture and was not a bad person. Chu Li said, "All right, then I won't hold back. I just want 10 grandmasters." "No problem." Lu Yurong nodded. Fa Yuan muttered, "Brother Chu, let me help you as well." Chu Li shook his head and smiled. "Fa Yuan, you don't have to join in the fun. These people are enough." Fa Yuan hesitated. Although the public house was strong, it was impossible to stop the Church of the Divine Blood. Adding 10 more masters would not affect the big picture. Chu Li said, "The Church of the Divine Blood might not really take revenge. Wei Wuwu killed his way here. If he died, it would be because he was not skilled enough. What right does the Church of the Divine Blood have to take revenge?" Sigh. Fa Yuan sighed and shook his head. Lu Yurong smiled. "Don't worry, monk. Chu Li is not that stupid. He won't kill Wei Wuwu if he doesn't have the confidence to stop the Church of the Divine Blood's revenge." Fa Yuan nodded slowly. Chu Li said, "If he doesn't have the confidence, let's give it a try. Follow me into the city. Let's drink to our heart's content." "That's what I was thinking," Lu Yurong said. She turned to look at the masters on the ground, and then at Chu Li. Chu Li floated over and patted the backs of the masters one by one, withdrawing the blood jade palm energy. They immediately stood up and fist saluted to thank him. They looked at Chu Li strangely. They did not expect Chu Li's martial arts to reach such a level. Chu Li fist saluted them one by one. He was gentle and friendly. He did not seem arrogant at all. His demeanor made everyone admire him. Chu Li brought Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan into Chongming Town. Chongming town was already filled with people. They saw the scene of Chu Li showing off his prowess. They all looked at him with admiration and fanaticism. With such a person, Chongming town was as stable as a rock. No one could bully them. Their minds were filled with pride. They did not think about what would happen to the Church of the Divine Blood's revenge. Chu Li smiled and waved at the crowd. He entered the High Duke's public house with Lu Yurong and the other two and went to the East Garden. He did not bring the two to the Jade Guardian Island or his own island. Shao Qi and Shao Shi did not like Lu Yurong. Chapter 3269. Chu Li personally poured wine for the three of them and smiled. Miss Lu, Fa Yuan, it's been a while since we've gathered together like this. Fa Yuan took the glass. Brother Chu, you've been in isolated cultivation. I didn't expect your cultivation to improve so much. It's amazing. I was just lucky. Chu Li shook his head. This time, the life and death scripture saved his life. He was really lucky. If he really died, he might not have the chance to reincarnate. He might even enter the cycle of reincarnation and lose his memories of his past life. This made him more interested and curious about the life and death scripture. It was really a rare martial art. He was really lucky. Lu Yurong said, "You offended the Sword Moon sect last time, right?" Chu Li nodded. Lu Yurong smiled. The Sword Moon sect came for revenge, but they couldn't do anything to you. Do you have a plan? Chu Li picked up the glass and took a sip. He smiled but did not say anything. Fa Yuan also took a sip. Brother Chu, you must have someone in the Sword Moon sect? Chu Li smiled. I have a way to track their whereabouts. If I set up a formation in advance, they won't be able to win no matter how strong they are. Lu Yurong rolled her eyes. Do you really have a spy? Chu Li smiled but did not say anything. Lu Yurong knew that he would not say anything more, so she changed the topic. Chu Li, this time, you've made the name of the Northern Chu Li famous. Both of us have become your foil. Are you happy now? Chu Li fist saluted. I really have to thank the two of you. If it wasn't for the two of you, he would have interrupted my isolated cultivation. The result would be unpredictable. Did you learn anything from your injury? Lu Yurong asked. You were injured earlier, but now you can easily kill him. Chu Li shook his head. I was ambushed by the bishop of the Church of the Divine Blood and chased by Wei Wuwei. I almost lost my life. The bishop of the Church of the Divine Blood. Lu Yurong was surprised. Chu Li sighed. With my current cultivation level, I can't even take one hit from him. It's really scary. He has the cultivation level of an enlightened master. Although the hierarch of the Divine Blood Church could not compare to an enlightened master's attack and his inner energy was not as pure as an enlightened master's, his blood jade palm could make up for some of the difference. Anyone who was hit by his blood jade palm would almost certainly die. He possessed several mystical skills and had cultivated all of them to a profound level. Relying on these mystical skills, he was invincible. However, when he encountered the consummate blood jade palm, he was still killed without the slightest bit of resistance. It was clear how terrifying it was. The leader of the Divine Blood Church, Huang Tianhe, is indeed a genius. Fa Yuan nodded lightly. He became famous at a young age and is a rare genius. Unfortunately, his luck is not good. The enlightened masters of the Fu dynasty can only be disciples of Goddess Attraction Mountain. Chu Li asked, Fa Yuan, is there any way to restrain the blood jade palm? Every martial art has a way to restrain it. Fa Yuan nodded lightly. The blood jade palm is powerful, but there are ways to restrain it. Chu Li raised his eyebrows. Tell me about it. Fa Yuan said, from what I know, the blood jade palm is restrained by the 8-9 divine technique. Chu Li was stunned. Fa Yuan nodded. It is the heart technique of the Fu dynasty's Union Palace, the Union Divine technique. Lu Yurong said, is the 8-9 divine kung fu so magical? The 8-9 divine technique can change one's physique and purify one's blood. That is the reason why none of the women who cultivate the 8-9 divine technique are ugly. Fa Yuan nodded lightly. Lu Yurong smiled. Now that you mention it, I want to cultivate it. Fa Yuan shook his head. The 8-9 divine technique requires an extremely high aptitude. Miss Lu, although your aptitude is good, you may not be able to cultivate it. Lu Yurong rolled her eyes at him. Chu Li sighed. So, I can't do anything to the blood jade palm? Fa Yuan smiled and shook his head. Lu Yurong said, then you can only rely on your cultivation level to fight it. But don't worry, he won't dare to come to the Ji dynasty. There's the divine monk from the Tempest Temple. The Tempest Temple had an enlightened master. If a peerless master like Huang Tianhe came to the Ji dynasty, the enlightened master would definitely sense it and chase him away, or even kill him. The other sects in the Ji dynasty were afraid of the Fu dynasty for revenge, but the Tempest Temple was not. With an enlightened master, the Fu dynasty would not dare to provoke them. Fa Yuan shook his head. Chu Li said, if that's the case, I can only cultivate in isolation. You're still going to cultivate in isolation? Are you really going to steal Fa Yuan's enlightened master in the future? Lu Yurong smiled. Her bright eyes were full of charm, but her words were meant to sow discord. Fa Yuan smiled. Brother Chu, you must become an enlightened master. Chu Li shook his head. I don't want to walk this path. I want to defy nature and become an enlightened master. You're crazy. Lu Yurong smiled. Chu Li said, after a while, I'm planning to go to Goddess Attraction Mountain to see if I can become their disciple. Impossible. Lu Yurong scoffed. Goddess Attraction Mountain is too strict in accepting disciples. The requirements for aptitude are too high. Although you're a genius, it's impossible for them to take a liking to you. From what I know, in the past 100 years, Goddess Attraction Mountain has only accepted one disciple. Those from the imperial families are only outer disciples who do odd jobs. Fa Yuan was shocked. Brother Chu, are you really going to walk this path? Chu Li nodded slowly. Becoming an enlightened master is boring now. Besides, I can't steal your position. Why don't I try becoming an enlightened master? Becoming an enlightened master was completely different from becoming an enlightened master. After becoming an enlightened master, one's life would be in their own hand. This path is too difficult. Fa Yuan sighed and bowed with his palms pressed together. Lu Yurong said, then I wish you success. She had no hope of becoming an enlightened master. Compared to becoming an enlightened master, she was more concerned about the prosperity of the High Duke's public house. She continued, can you really resist the Church of the Divine Blood's revenge? I'll wait and see. Chu Li smiled. The four of them chatted and drank. Li Yu listened from the side without saying much. After Chu Li sent Lu Yurong and Fa Yuan away, he continued to drink and chat with Li Yu. Chu Li, I'm getting married. Li Yu smiled. Chu Li was startled. He then laughed. Brother Li, you have someone in your heart? Yes. Li Yu grinned. Chu Li shook his head when he saw how happy he was. How long has it been? You're getting married? He often came to see Li Yu. Staying in the East Garden allowed him to completely relax. It was as if he had returned to the state of mind when he first entered the High Duke's public house. It had only been a month, and Li Yu already had someone in his heart. He was getting married. Then I'll have to meet my sister-in-law. Chu Li smiled. When are you getting married? I'm still choosing the date. Next month will be fine. Li Yu smiled. All right. Chu Li was happy for Li Yu. Make it more lively. Li Yu smiled and nodded. He was a cheerful person and liked to make friends. He was very popular in the High Duke's public house. Chu Li could not be compared to him. Even though Chu Li had a high position now, he could not compare to Li Yu in terms of popularity. One could imagine that Li Yu's wedding would be very lively. When he returned to the Jade Guardian Island, Shao Qi, Shao Shi, and Xue Ling were still waiting for him. Chu Li first asked Xue Ling to find out who Li Yu's sweetheart was. He did not want Li Yu to be happy for nothing and be used by others. Xue Ling smiled and left. Shao Qi and Shao Shi looked at him from top to bottom. The two of them had already received the news and knew about Chu Li's amazing performance. "You're really brave. Aren't you afraid of the Church of the Divine Blood's revenge?" Shao Shi asked. Chu Li smiled and shook his head. Shao Qi said, "The Church of the Divine Blood is different from the Sword Moon sect. They are much fiercer. I have my ways." Chu Li smiled. Chapter 3270. Could it be the Sword Moon sect's method of sowing discord? Xiao Shi asked. Chu Li shook his head. "This time, we'll have to use force and show the might of our public house, so that the Fu dynasty won't look down on us." He was different from the people of the Ji dynasty as he had a deeper understanding of the Fu dynasty. He knew that although the 8 major sects were united against the outside world, the conflicts between them were extremely deep. Some of them were even mortal enemies, just like the Sword Moon sect and the Church of the Divine Blood. As long as there was a slight provocation, they would take advantage of each other's weakness. No matter how strong the public house was, it would not attract the attention of the 8 major sections. After all, it was just a public house, which was different from the sects in the martial arts world. Their main purpose was to guard their territory. As long as the public house displayed a tyrannical strength that could affect the rise and fall of the 8 major sects, they would not provoke them. If the one who killed Wei Wuwei this time was one of the 8 major sects of the Fu dynasty or a master from the Holy Church of Light, the Church of the Divine Blood would only seek revenge on the murderer. However, the public house was too weak in the eyes of the Church of the Divine Blood, so they wanted to take revenge on the public house. "Our abilities are far from the Church of the Divine Blood. How can we fight them head-on?" Xiao Shi frowned. Chu Li shook his head and said, "The current Church of the Divine Blood is different from before. It's not as powerful as before." The Church of the Divine Blood had been attacked by the 3 sects of the Stargazing Pavilion, causing them to suffer heavy losses. Now, Wei Wuwei was no longer around to joke around. Just as he was about to return to his room to sleep, Xue Ling fluttered over and handed him a dossier. "Master, this is news regarding Li Yu's sweetheart." Chu Li took it. Xiao Qi and Xiao Shi stopped in their tracks and turned around. Shao Shi said, "Chu Li, you're being too cautious. Are you worried about Li Yu's sweetheart?" She knew the relationship between Chu Li and Li Yu. They were good friends and good brothers. Shao Qi frowned. "I've seen Miss Li Shu before. There's no problem." Chu Li and Li Yu were friends, but she was not. Li Yu was still her subordinate. Of course, she had to take a look at Miss Li Shu. Only after seeing her would she feel at ease. She also had the ability to read people's minds. Chu Li nodded and did not say much. He began to carefully read through the dossier. Xue stared at him and the 2 women stared back at him. Chu Li quickly flipped through the dossier and frowned. "There's something wrong with this woman." Through the information in the dossier, he found out that Li Shu was not originally a protector of the public house, but a disciple of a small faction in the martial arts world. Later on, when she went to Chongming Town to play, she met Li Yu, and the 2 of them fell in love at first sight. It was indeed suspicious that Shao Qi would investigate her. However, after Shao Qi took a look, she did not find anything wrong with Li Shu. Things in the world were more bizarre than one could imagine. Therefore, even though such a thing seemed bizarre, it might not necessarily be untrue. Shao Qi did not delve into it further. Xiao Shi asked curiously, "What's the problem?" Chu Li shook his head. "We'll only know after we meet." "Is there really a problem?" Xiao Qi frowned and asked. She was confident that her discerning eyes could see through a person's heart with just a glance. Other than Chu Li, there were very few exceptions. She could see through Li Shu's thoughts clearly, so there was no problem. Chu Li said, "There must be something wrong. I'll meet her personally." "All right then." Shao Qi did not probe further. Xiao Shi smiled. "Could it be a honey trap? Who would want to deal with us?" Xue Ling shook her head. Chu Li said, "We have quite a lot of enemies. I'm curious as to which faction they are from." A gentle breeze blew and the sun shone brightly. At noon, Chu Li arrived at the East Garden. Li Yu was weeding in the moonlight orchid garden. He was very careful. Beside him was a woman with a graceful figure. She was helping him with the weeds. The breeze was gentle and it was very quiet. Chu Li's footsteps could be heard. Li Yu turned his head and saw him. He put down his farming tools and greeted him with a smile. "Brother Chu, why are you here again?" Chu Li smiled. "I wanted to meet your wife." "You?" Li Yu shook his head and pointed at the beautiful woman who had already stood up and was looking at him. He smiled. "This is her, Li Shu." Chu Li gave a fist salute to Li Shu and smiled. "Greetings, Miss Li." The woman in front of him was not tall. She had a graceful figure and a pure and beautiful face. She was indeed a rare beauty. Her delicate and charming temperament could easily arouse a man's desire to protect her. Chu Li sighed. It was no wonder that Li Yu fell in love at first sight. She was indeed a woman who could easily move a man's heart. There were many beautiful women, especially the maids in the public house. Although they were not as beautiful as Xue Ling, they were still considered rare beauties in the outside world. Li Shu was not more beautiful than the maids in the public house. However, her temperament was much more delicate, which made her more pitiful. "Greetings, Chief Chu." Li Shu curtsied. Chu Li looked at her and shook his head. "You flatter me. Go and prepare some food and wine. He's here for a free meal." Li Yu smiled. "All right." Li Shu nodded her head and replied softly. Then, she left. Li Yu watched her as she disappeared before he slowly retracted his gaze. When he turned to look at Chu Li, he was stunned. Chu Li's face was solemn. There was no trace of the smile he had before. "Why?" Li Yu was confused. "You don't like her?" Chu Li shook his head. "There's something wrong with her. She has an ulterior motive for getting close to you." Li Yu hesitated for a moment and sighed. Chu Li furrowed his brows. "Do you know? As expected, I can't hide it from you." Li Yu smiled bitterly. "You saw through it with one look." Chu Li pondered for a moment before he suddenly laughed and shook his head. "She told you the truth, didn't she?" Li Yu nodded slowly. "She did have an ulterior motive for getting close to me. She told me the truth." Chu Li asked, "Who is she?" "She's from the Ren public house." Li Yu sighed. Chu Li asked, "And?" Chapter 3271. Chu Li scoffed. "So that's why you can't wait to get married and cook the rice?" Li Yu smiled sheepishly. "Yes." "Aren't you afraid that she'll lie to you again?" Chu Li asked. Li Yu shook his head firmly. "She won't lie to me again. I like her and she likes me. She won't leave the public house anymore. As long as she doesn't leave the public house, the Ren public house can't do anything to her." "Does that mean she's going to betray the Ren public house?" Chu Li asked. Li Yu nodded. "Betraying the Ren public house and Lu Yurong for you?" Chu Li pondered. Li Yu said, "Although she's a protector of the Ren public house, she's never lived there. She's unfamiliar with the Ren public house, so she doesn't have a deep relationship with them." Chu Li sighed. "You know what Lu Yurong is capable of. Do you really think she'll betray her so easily?" "Women are extroverted." Li Yu smiled. "Once she has a man, she won't care so much." "You're so confident." Chu Li laughed. Li Yu said, "Don't make things difficult for her." "You're protecting her just like that?" Chu Li shook his head and sighed. "If I were to attack her, you'd turn against me." Li Yu said angrily, "She's just a weak woman. Why would you attack her?" Chu Li shook his head and smiled. Li Yu showed a pitiful expression and shook his head. "She actually has a hard life. She was forced to do this by Lu Yurong. Chu Li shook his head. Li Yu glared at him. Don't you think she has a hard life? This isn't something an ordinary person can do. Chu Li smiled. This Miss Li is not an ordinary woman. She's really powerful. Li Yu smiled. Chu Li smiled bitterly to himself. Li Yu had obviously fallen into the trap of love and was unable to extricate himself. Brother Chu, I've made things difficult for you, haven't I? Li Yu finally stopped smiling and said bitterly, I know it's difficult for you. This is what you're in charge of. Chu Li said, Brother Li, it's quite troublesome. That's right. Li Yu sighed bitterly. Even if she admits her identity, it still doesn't make us feel at ease. You're going to move out. Chu Li frowned. Li Yu nodded lightly. As long as Li Yu moved out, Li Shu would not be able to enter the public house again. Then, she would not be able to talk about the secret of the public house. Moreover, the Ren public house could not do anything about it. They could not force Li Yu to move out. Chu Li asked, Aren't you afraid that she'll be in danger? It can't be helped. Li Yu gritted his teeth. Chu Li smiled and shook his head. Brother Li, you're still playing tricks with me. Li Yu smiled helplessly. I knew I couldn't hide it from you. I really had no other choice. He was at his wit's end, so he had to act pitiful and ask Chu Li for help. Chu Li was intelligent, so he must have a solution. Chu Li patted his shoulder. All right, I'll try my best. I'm relieved to hear that. Li Yu smiled. Chu Li shook his head and smiled. He tied his clothes to his waist, rolled up his sleeves, picked up a hoe beside him, and began to hoe. Li Shu fluttered over. Chief Chu, Brother Li, the food is ready. We can eat now. The two of them left the Moonlight Orchid's flower bed, washed their hands, and sat down in the gazebo. Li Shu poured wine for the two of them. Li Yu suddenly stood up. I'll go make another dish. Chu Li nodded. Li Shu wanted to follow him to the kitchen, but Li Yu waved his hand. I'll do it myself. You accompany Brother Chu for a drink or two. Don't let him say that we didn't treat him well. Li Shu showed a hesitant expression. Although Chu Li was smiling from ear to ear, she was secretly on guard. The most important hurdle had finally arrived. Li Yu smiled. He has agreed to help. Li Shu nodded helplessly, showing a pitiful expression. After Li Yu left, Chu Li finished his wine in one gulp. Li Shu refilled his cup for him. Miss Li is really smart. Chu Li smiled. I wanted to be honest with Brother Li in advance so that he could beg me. If not for that, Miss Li would have already entered the Glory's Will courtyard, and Brother Li wouldn't have known. Li Shu sighed. I wanted to hide it from him at first, but I couldn't stand the torment in my heart. I could only grit my teeth and tell him. Fortunately, he is broad-minded and didn't blame me or treat me coldly. Chu Li smiled. I know how powerful Lu Yurong is. It's not easy for you to be chosen by her. Those who are not mature and determined will not be able to enter her eyes. Brother Li has a good eye. Li Shu looked embarrassed. Chu Li raised his cup and smiled. Then I wish you both a long life together. He finished speaking and finished his wine in one gulp. Li Shu let out a sigh of relief. She knew that she had passed this hurdle, but she didn't expect it to be so easy. She channeled her strange heart technique, multitasking. She was secretly laughing at how easy it was to deal with Chu Li. Miss Li treated him as if he was her greatest enemy, taking him seriously. She kept warning herself to be careful when dealing with him. Li Yu came quickly, smiling as he served them a dish. Seeing Chu Li's smile and Li Shu's reaction, she let out a sigh of relief. After Chu Li finished his meal and left, Li Yu quickly asked Li Shu, Young Shu, Brother Chu didn't make things difficult for you, did he? Li Shu shook her head and smiled. It seems that Brother Li and Chief Chu are really good friends. He didn't make things difficult for me and even wished us a long life together. That's good. Li Yu smiled. Brother Chu may look like he's all smiles, but when he strikes, he won't hold back. I think he's quite easygoing. He's not that scary. Li Shu smiled like a flower. Li Yu shook his head. That's in front of me. We're just insignificant acquaintances. When you see how he treats the others in the public house, you'll know if he's that friendly or not. Chu Li talked and laughed casually with him, just like before. However, in front of the others in the public house, he was calm and collected. He barely smiled, and his aura was intimidating, making others respect him. Brother Li, you're really capable. Li Shu smiled. To be able to make him like this. Li Yu shook his head and smiled. He hates traitors the most. Young Shu, don't be stupid. Otherwise, he'll turn against you. Yes, don't worry. Li Shu smiled. In the evening, she left the public house and walked along the street with light steps into a rouge shop. She said to the shop assistant beside the counter, "I'd like to see the shopkeeper." The young shop assistant had delicate features and sharp eyes. He smiled. "Miss Li, I'm really sorry. The shopkeeper is not here." "Not here?" Li Shu frowned. "When did he go out?" "He was called by a protector of the public house. He hasn't returned yet." The young shop assistant smiled. "A protector of the public house?" Li Shu asked. The young shop assistant smiled. "Yes." Li Shu nodded and turned to leave the rouge shop. There was a layer of doubt in her heart. The next morning, she came back again and saw that only the young shop assistant was there. The young shop assistant saw her and quickly smiled. "Miss Li, are you looking for the shopkeeper? The shopkeeper came last night and said that there's an urgent matter at home. I'm not sure when he'll be back." Li Shu nodded, smiled at the young shop assistant and turned to leave. She left the rouge shop and walked on the street. She sighed to herself. She knew that the messenger had fallen into the hands of the public house and would not come back. This must be Chu Li's trick. He was forcing her to cut off her relationship with the Ren public house. She wanted to confront Chu Li directly, but she did not dare to. She looked to her left and right, then casually walked along the street. There were many breakfast stalls on the side of the street. It was very lively. She finally entered a restaurant and glanced at the counter. She did not see the shopkeeper and was a little worried. Chapter 3272. The other messenger was the shopkeeper of the restaurant. He was supposed to be here this morning, but she did not see him today. She saw that the other messenger was exposed, but she was worried that this messenger would be exposed as well. She comforted herself that it was not a coincidence. These messengers had been in the town for more than 10 to 20 years. They had nothing to do with the House of High Dukes. There was no movement at all. They would only move when she appeared. She sat by the window and asked the waiter. She was told that a protector from the House of High Dukes had come to take the shopkeeper away. Li Shu sighed helplessly. She knew that she had guessed correctly. She finally witnessed Chu Li's capabilities. When he was not in the House of High Dukes, no one noticed her or the messenger. But as soon as he appeared, he immediately made a move. The Chief of Glories will courtyard. No wonder Lady Xiao was so cautious. He was really powerful. She sighed to herself. It was a good thing she had Li Yu to protect her. For Li Yu's sake, Chu Li would not do anything to her. As long as she did not act rashly, everything would be fine. It was noon and the midday sun was shining overhead. There was already a hint of heat in the air. It was going to be a scorching summer soon. The East Garden was still warm like spring. It was refreshing and comfortable. Chu Li and Lu Yurong were sitting in a gazebo by the lake. Other than them, there was no one else. Li Yu placed the dishes on the stone table and left immediately. Lu Yurong was dressed in white. As she watched Li Yu leave, she elegantly took off her white veil, revealing her beautiful face. She smiled sweetly. "It's rare that you think of me. Tell me, what's the matter?" Chu Li scoffed. "Lady Lu, you already know the answer. Don't you know why I'm looking for you?" "I don't know what you're thinking." Lu Yurong shook her head. She had received an invitation from two people and came to meet them. Of course, she knew what was going on. The two people who sent the invitation were two hidden pawns in Chongming Town. They had not been used for more than 10 years. They had just been placed on the chessboard when Chu Li removed them and sent them here. This was no different from a slap to her face. It was as if he was laughing at her incompetence. She was angry, so she came to see what Chu Li was up to. Chu Li scoffed. Miss Lu, what's the point of playing these dirty tricks? Sometimes small tricks can achieve big things, Lu Yurong said lightly. Chu Li's face darkened. It's not a big deal for you to send people to the House of High Dukes. I'll just kill whoever comes. Let's see if you have more people or if I have better eyes. But you shouldn't have set your sights on Li Yu. Lu Yurong smiled. Li Yu is your weakness, how could I let him off the hook? What are you going to do now? Don't let Li Yu know that you've done this to him? Chu Li shook his head. Brother Li has fallen for Miss Li Shu. That's a good thing. Lu Yurong smiled and said, I wish them a happy ending. Chu Li said, I'll return those two to you in exchange for Miss Li. Lu Yurong frowned. You want me to give up Li Shu? Of course. Chu Li nodded. You have to make it clear to Miss Li in person. Tell her to give up and be Li Yu's wife. Tell her not to have any improper thoughts or do anything that will harm the House of High Dukes. She can live in the East Garden. What if she continues to work for me? Lu Yurong asked. Chu Li smiled. I don't think you will. Lu Yurong said, You'll just kill her? I guarantee that Li Yu will find out. Li Yu is a smart man. Chu Li smiled faintly. If Li Shu doesn't want to do her part, then I'll have to make a move too. I'll pay a visit to the other houses of High Dukes and help them out. I'll see if Miss Lu has anyone in their houses. Lu Yurong frowned and squinted her eyes. Her clear eyes scanned Chu Li's face like a sharp blade. Chu Li smiled and looked at her. Their eyes were locked in a stalemate. To outsiders, it looked like they were looking at each other with deep feelings. Chu Li said, You love spying. I wonder how many of your spies are in the other imperial houses? Whether it's from the House of High Dukes or the Secret Guardians Hall, you've planted quite a few of them, haven't you? Lu Yurong's face darkened and became as cold as ice. Chu Li chuckled. Do you think I can get rid of them one by one and not leave a single one behind? Chu Li, you're getting more and more overbearing. Lu Yurong said coldly. The stronger your martial arts, the bigger your temper. Chu Li sighed and shook his head. Same here. Miss Lu, you're the same. The higher your position, the more vicious your methods. We've all changed. Do you really think you're invincible? Lu Yurong laughed coldly. You're also a smart man. You should know the methods of the Tempest Temple. Your opponent is not me, it's the Tempest Temple. Chu Li said, You want to use the Tempest Temple to kill me, right? If I can kill you, that would be the best. Lu Yurong's face thawed. She smiled sweetly. In order to make Fa Yuan the world's #1, the Tempest Temple will not be merciful. You must be eliminated. Chu Li shook his head. Fa Yuan might not be the strongest in the Tempest Temple. I think he's just a cover. The strongest is still in the Tempest Temple. He might not lose to me. That's possible. Lu Yurong nodded lightly. The old men in the Tempest Temple are all scheming. Chu Li scoffed. You want to kill me, but the one who wants to kill me is the Crown Prince, right? It's good that you know. Lu Yurong said. Chu Li's martial arts was too strong. He was too much of a threat. If he were to assassinate him at a critical moment, the Crown Prince might not be his match. Even if the Crown Prince was empowered by the Grandmaster, she felt that the Crown Prince was no match for Chu Li. Chu Li said lightly, If the Crown Prince goes too far, then I can only fight back. At worst, I'll just die with him. It's better than being killed by him. All right, I'll persuade His Highness. Lu Yurong said. Chu Li raised his voice. Brother Li. Brother Li. Li Yu rushed over. Chu Li said, Go and invite Miss Li over. All right. Li Yu glanced at Lu Yurong, then turned and strode away. Chu Li and Lu Yurong drank a cup of wine. Li Yu brought Li Shu to the gazebo. Chu Li looked at Lu Yurong. Lu Yurong sighed and looked at Li Shu. Li Shu saw this scene and was confused. She did not know what was going on. Lu Yurong said, "Young Shu, from now on, you are no longer a protector of the Ren public house." "My lady?" Li Shu's eyes widened. Lu Yurong shook her head. "Do you really like Li Yu, or is it because of the mission?" Li Shu hesitated for a moment. She looked at Li Yu and shook her head. Li Yu's expression changed. He looked at her blankly. Li Shu sighed. "My lady, I really like Brotherly. But if you have an order, I will obey it." "That's good." Lu Yurong smiled. "But from today onwards, you are no longer a member of the Ren public house. Follow Li Yu well. He will not mistreat you." She turned to look at Li Yu. "Li Yu, if you betray young Shu, I will take your life. Chu Li can't stop me." Chapter 3273. Chu Li smiled. "This matter has been resolved. Miss Li, you can stay in the East Garden from now on. It will save you the trouble of coming and going." "This..." Li Shu hesitated. Lu Yurong said, "It's rare for Chu Li to be so considerate. Stay here then. You are considered a member of the public house." Li Shu was embarrassed. "My lady, her life was saved by Lu Yurong. Without Lu Yurong, she would have died 10 years ago. She lived for 10 years without worrying about food or clothing, but she was not able to serve the Ren public house. She was not able to repay the lady's kindness." Chu Li said, "If Miss Li wants to repay your lady, then live a good life. Don't make her worry." "Yes." Lu Yurong smiled. "We have reconciled with the public house. You don't need to do anything." "Yes." Li Shu nodded. Lu Yurong said, "All right, you can leave. I have something to say to Chu Li." The two closed fists saluted and left the pagoda. Chu Li said calmly, "Miss Lu, this is the only time. If something like this happens again, I won't be polite." "You're good." Lu Yurong rolled her eyes. "You're getting more and more difficult to deal with." Chu Li said, "You're crossing my bottom line. Don't blame me for not saying anything." "All right." Lu Yurong shook her head helplessly. She had always wanted to take Chu Li down and cause him some trouble so that his martial arts would not improve too quickly. Unfortunately, she could not stop him. Lu Yurong changed the topic. "How do you plan to deal with the revenge of the Church of the Divine Blood?" "Wait for them to pass by and teach them a lesson." Chu Li said, "Are your people ready?" "They can hold him back." "It's obvious that they want to hold him back. The other 18 people will slaughter the House of High Duke." However, with Chu Li's omniscient mirror and manifestation of nature restoration, they could not work together and were defeated by Chu Li. In the blink of an eye, 20 masters from the Church of the Divine Blood fell. The 20 high officials stared at the ground in disbelief. They felt the gap between their cultivation levels. They thought it would be a tough battle. They did not expect their opponents to be defeated so easily. Chu Li said, "Everyone be careful. Continue to fight." Everyone was stunned and looked at him in confusion. Chu Li pointed to the front. 10 streaks of light arrived in front of them in no time and stopped 10 meters away from them. They were 10 elders, all grandmasters. They were dressed in green robes and had long swords hanging from their waists. "Who are you?" an old man asked in a deep voice. Chu Li said, "Chu Li. You're disciples of the Sword Moon sect, right?" "Very well, I'm going to kill you." The old man shouted and waved his hand. "Kill?" Chu Li retreated and repeated the scene where he dealt with the masters from the Church of the Divine Blood. He hid behind the crowd and silently shot out the petrifying finger. He did not warn the masters from the Church of the Divine Blood who were lying on the ground. He could not wait for the Sword Moon sect to suffer. After a while, the 10 Sword Moon sect disciples also collapsed, heavily injured. Chu Li looked at the people on the ground and shook his head. "Do you really think that the Ji dynasty is powerless? I won't kill you this time, but if there is a next time, I will kill without mercy." After saying that, he waved his hand and led everyone away. There were 30 grandmasters lying on the ground. All of them were heavily injured. The masters from the Sword Moon sect and the Church of the Divine Blood were mixed together. They were only 2 meters away from each other. To them, it was within arm's reach and they could directly attack. They still had some rationality. They knew that if they fought now, they would eventually perish together. Therefore, they sat up and channeled to heal their injuries. They brought spirit medicine with them, and quickly recovered most of their strength after consuming it. Therefore, they fought together. The 20 masters from the Church of the Divine Blood and 10 masters from the Sword Moon sect fought fiercely. The masters from the Sword Moon sect retreated as they fought. In the end, 2 masters performed a secret skill to block the rest of the masters from the Church of the Divine Blood, while the remaining 8 escaped. Chapter 3274. He suddenly turned his head and looked into the distance. He saw Lu Yurong standing on a treetop in a forest. Her white robes fluttered in the wind, like a fairy who was above the mortal world, about to be carried by the wind to the heavenly palace. 23T Lu Yurong stood on the treetop and gazed into the distance. Her eyes sparkled like jewels. She looked at the 2 groups of people who were fighting fiercely without any regard for their own lives. She shook her head and sighed to herself. Chu Li was no longer the Chu Li of the past. The Chu Li of today could be said to have soared to the sky, and no one could stop him. He was like a blazing sun in the sky. Fortunately, he valued friendship and the public house was still his weakness. Otherwise, if it was really dangerous, he would probably fight to the death. Lu Yurong immediately saw through Chu Li's plan. Both sects were part of the 8 major sects of the Fu dynasty, so it was difficult to determine who was stronger. Naturally, they would not let today's grudge go unavenged. The 2 sects would definitely fight to the death, so they would not have the time to deal with the public house. She shook her head and turned around to leave. In the distance, Monk Fa Yuan's gray frock fluttered as he left. He initially wanted to lend a hand, but he did not expect Chu Li to be so swift and fierce. In such a short period of time, he had defeated the masters from 2 sections. He was truly unfathomable. He could not tell that Chu Li's petrifying finger was invisible and formless. Moreover, Chu Li's petrifying finger was even more secretive than his, making it extremely difficult to detect. Chu Li returned to the public house and sent the 2 ladies to the Spirit Crane's Peak for isolated cultivation. Seeing that the matter had been resolved, the 2 ladies felt relieved and wanted to cultivate in peace at Spirit Crane's Peak. The spiritual energy at Spirit Crane's Peak was 10 or even 100 times denser than the outside world, so their cultivation progress would be extremely fast. It would be beneficial for Shao Qi to advance by leaps and bounds, and Shao Shi's heavenly heart technique would also advance rapidly. Chu Li brought the 2 girls and appeared at the Spirit Crane's Peak in a flash. He played with the 2 cranes for a while and then built a simple wooden house for the 2 girls. The 2 cranes even stepped on the wooden house out of curiosity. "They're still in isolated cultivation and won't go out," Xueling quickly said. Chu Li shook his head and said, "I have no choice but to come out of isolated cultivation. Don't take out this letter before a month has passed." "Yes." Xueling suppressed her worry and nodded lightly. Chu Li smiled and patted her shoulder. "Don't worry, I won't die." "Yes." Xue nodded vigorously. She had full confidence in Chu Li, but when she looked at the letter in her hand, she was still a little worried. This was the first time young master had done something like this. Could it be that the Li dynasty was really that dangerous? Chu Li suddenly disappeared and went to the Spirit Crane's Peak to fetch the 2 ladies. They had been in isolated cultivation for 20 days and were almost at their limit. If they continued to forcefully cultivate, it would not be good. Then, he hurriedly bid farewell to the two ladies and appeared outside Falling Autumn City. After he had restrained his cultivation level, he used his light body technique to glide into Falling Autumn City and saw Sun Mingyue sitting in the branch. Chapter 3275. Chu gave a fist salute and smiled. "Why are you here, Saint?" "I'm here to see you." Sun Mingyue sized him up and gestured for him to sit down. She said, "Do you know that Method King has ascended to the great light-surpassing state?" Chu was about to sit opposite her when he heard this. He was stunned and asked, "Method King has gone?" Sun Mingyue's eyes were clear as water as she quietly sized him up and sighed. 4 monks from the Reincarnation Temple tried to assassinate Method King. Method King couldn't escape and fought desperately to ascend to the great light-surpassing state. What about the 4 monks? Chu frowned and sat on the armchair. Sun Mingyue said, "They died with him." Chu let out a long sigh and nodded slowly. "That's good. It seems like the Reincarnation Temple couldn't find me and vented their anger on Method King. I'm the one who dragged Method King into this. D***mn the Reincarnation Temple." As he spoke, he fiercely slapped the armrest of the armchair. Crack! The armrest broke. Sun Mingyue said, "You try to assassinate me, I try to assassinate you. There's nothing hateful about it. However, you killed Monk Zhishan. That's different. He's one of the top experts of the younger generation. They're really angry now." Chu said, "Method King can't die in vain. If that's the case, let's make a scene." Sun Mingyue said, "How?" "The Reincarnation Temple has an enlightened master. Do you dare to challenge them?" "If you don't dare to challenge the Reincarnation Temple, we can challenge their branch." Chu scoffed. Sun Mingyue said, "You challenge their branch and they destroy ours. We're just wasting each other's energy. Let's end this here. An eye for an eye." Chu was stunned and looked at her in disbelief. Sun Mingyue said, "You still want to fight? Are there other sects that are restless?" Chu frowned. "White Tiger Sect? Flaming Sun Sect? The Church of the Divine Blood," Sun Mingyue said. Chu frowned. "Them? They dare to come again? I've heard a piece of news." Sun Mingyue looked at Chu with a faint smile and said, "Chu of the Ji dynasty killed Wei Wei and killed many masters from the Church of the Divine Blood, forcing the Church of the Divine Blood to not dare to come again." Chu smiled. "There's such a thing?" Sun Mingyue looked at him with a faint smile on her face. "I killed Chu with my own hands. I didn't expect him to possess such a miraculous skill and be able to come back to life. The next time I kill him, I won't be soft-hearted and leave him with a whole corpse. I'll cut off his head and see if he can still come back to life." Chu sighed. "There's such a strange skill in this world? The world is vast and full of wonders." Sun Mingyue turned her bright eyes away and looked outside the door. She said casually, "Not only is there such a strange technique for pretending to be dead, there is also a strange technique for changing one's appearance. It is impossible to guard against it." Chu smiled and shook his head. "Forgive me for being ignorant, but I've never seen such things. The next time I return to the Great Light Peak, I must go to the Sutra Library to take a look and broaden my horizons. However, only Priest Lu and I are left in the Holy Church. Priest Lu is in isolated cultivation to heal his injuries." "Oh, he's out now?" "No." Sun Mingyue shook her head. "You're the only priest left now." Chu smiled bitterly. "It seems like my responsibilities are getting bigger and bigger. I can't do it alone. I wonder when Priest Lu will come out." Sun Mingyue nodded. Chu sighed. "If Priest Lu and I are not here, the Holy Church will not have a priest. I wonder if the White Tiger Sect and the others will cause trouble." Sun Mingyue took off her veil and revealed her beautiful face. It was as if it was carved from a piece of suet jade and exuded a gentle luster. "They won't. With Master around, they won't dare to cause trouble." This is the power of an enlightened master. Chu Li smiled. That's good. Sun Mingyue asked, Priest Zhao, am I beautiful? Chu Li nodded. The saint's beauty is unparalleled. It's rare. How do you compare to Xiao Shi, the most beautiful woman in the Ji dynasty? Sun Mingyue stared at him with her watery eyes and a faint smile. Chu Li was stunned and shook his head helplessly. I've never seen Xiao Shi's real face. How do you compare to Xiao Qi? Sun Mingyue asked. Chu Li could not help but laugh. Saint, how can I see them? Is that so? Sun Mingyue chuckled. You're Chu Li. How can you not see them? You're not telling the truth. Her beautiful face revealed a bright smile, as bright as a flower. She had always been cold and dignified. It was rare for her to smile like this. Now that he saw her, it was as if a snow lotus had bloomed, causing the world to lose its color. Chu Li smiled bitterly and shook his head. Sun Mingyue smiled. Chu Li, you've really deceived me. This is the first time someone has been able to deceive me for so long. I'm impressed by your tactics. It's a masterpiece. I'm impressed. Chu Li shook his head. Saint, you're better than me. I'm impressed too. Do you know how I recognized you? Sun Mingyue tilted her head and looked at him with a smile on her face. Chu Li knew that she was boiling with murderous intent. She was determined to kill him. He sighed and said, The saintess did something during the bestowment and saw through my secret. Sun Mingyue looked at him in surprise. You found out? Chu Li nodded. I just found out not long ago. When he absorbed the power of the Buddha bead, his soul was strengthened. When his mind was at its clearest, he noticed a thin thread in the void of his mind. It was almost undetectable and hidden among the thousands of lotuses. Fortunately, Chu Li's omniscient mirror had suddenly been strengthened and his mastery of microscopic details had deepened. Only then did he notice that something was amiss. With this thin thread, Sun Mingyue would be able to sense his location. For Sun Mingyue, knowing where he was enough. She was smart enough to figure out his identity with a single touch. Since you've found out, you still dare to come back? Sun Mingyue chuckled and shook her head. Do you think that I'll feign ignorance because I have no choice but to rely on you now that there are fewer priests and they've ascended to the great light-surpassing state? Chu Li smiled. Why did you expose me, Saint? Why didn't you continue to use me to work for the Holy Church? Sun Mingyue smiled. Maybe I can't stand it. Chu Li said, Saint, although I have ulterior motives, I'm still loyal to the Holy Church. I've made great contributions. You can't deny this, can you? That's right. Sun Mingyue nodded. If you weren't Chu Li and were someone else, I would have turned a blind eye and let you continue to be a priest. No matter who you are, it's fine as long as you're loyal to your duty. Chu Li smiled. Why can't I be Chu Li? Because you've killed too many disciples of the Holy Church. Sun Mingyue shook her head. How many disciples of the Holy Church were killed by you in Fairy's capital? Chu Li shook his head. You can't blame me for that, can you? When I was Chu Li, I was naturally loyal to my duty. When I was Zhao Dave, I was also loyal to my duty. I've never done anything to betray the Holy Church of Light. I didn't even send any news to the Ji dynasty. Sun Mingyue chuckled and shook her head. You really have a twisted logic. It's not that you don't want to send news, it's that you can't. Once the Ji dynasty's crown prince was appointed, Chu Li's power was immediately reduced and he had to leave the secret guardian's hall. Under such circumstances, how could Chu Li not be resentful? Even if he had information about the Holy Church, he would not tell the secret guardian's hall. This was human nature, so she did not doubt Chu Li's words. Chapter 3276. Sun Mingyue fixed her gaze on him. The atmosphere in the living room seemed to have frozen. The air seemed to have stopped flowing and time seemed to have stopped. Chu Li was the closest to her, so he could feel it the most. He could not help but secretly praise her. Her cultivation level was not the most impressive thing about her, but the energy of her soul was also extremely strong. It seemed like she was as gifted as him. His soul was strong because of his reincarnation, so he carried the memories of his past life. How could she have such a strong soul? He was very curious but knew that this was the deepest secret, so he would never tell anyone. Although he was Shao-Chi's husband and they were very close, he would never tell anyone about this secret. Chu Li looked at her calmly and continued, "I have the same thoughts as you, Saint." He gave her a fist salute. "Please allow me to change." Sun Mingyue scoffed and asked, "You won't run away, will you?" Chu Li smiled. "If I wanted to run away, why would I come?" "You were hoping to get lucky earlier," Sun Mingyue said. "Now that luck is no longer on my side, I can only run for my life." Chu Li smiled and shook his head. "I'll need to tidy up and meet you with my real face to show my sincerity." "Alright, go." Sun Mingyue looked at him deeply as if she wanted to see if he was telling the truth. Chu Li looked at her calmly and their eyes met. After a few rounds, Chu Li looked away, got up, gave her a fist salute, and entered the side room. Once he entered the room, his face quickly changed and returned to his original appearance in the blink of an eye. Although he was not extremely handsome, he was handsome and had an imposing appearance. His aura was as steady as the mountains and the sea, and it contained great power. He was supposed to be done in the blink of an eye, but he dawdled for a while as if he had spent a lot of effort. After 10 minutes, under Sun Mingyue's impatient urging, Chu Li slowly walked back to her and sat down. Sun Mingyue looked at his face and shook her head. "It's amazing. There are very few disguise skills in the world that can fool me. What secret skill is this?" Chu Li shook his head and smiled. "I have the saint's heart too. If she really guessed that it was the heavenly demonic power, he would be in endless trouble. She would definitely associate him with the heavenly demonic sect and the other heavenly demonic sect disciples. Although the disciples of heavenly demonic sect were famous for going their own way and not working together, she would still be on high alert. It was very likely that the disciples of heavenly demonic sect would not be able to escape her eyes. The heavenly demonic sect disciples were not only in the Ji dynasty but also in the Li dynasty to gather information. "What?" Sun Mingyue scoffed. Chu Li replied, "To get rid of the Fu dynasty's control." "You're quite bold." Sun Mingyue gave him a sidelong glance with a faint smile. As the saint of the Holy Church of Light, she was second only to the church leader. The church leader almost did not care about worldly affairs, and all the matters in the church were decided by her. Her power suppressed the world, which was why she had such thoughts. Although Chu Li's martial arts was strong, he was only a chief. He was the head chief of the imperial residence of King En, the chief of the public house, and not even the owner of the public house. His power and influence were worlds apart from hers. How could he have the right to say such words? Chu Li could tell what was on her mind. He calmly said, "There's no use in numbers in this matter, nor is there any use in power. We can only rely on martial arts." "Do you think you can defeat the Fu dynasty by yourself?" Sun Mingyue scoffed. "I'm not that capable." Chu Li said, "The Fu dynasty isn't that powerful either. The Church of the Divine Blood and the Sword Moon sect both want to deal with the High Duke's public house, but what about now? I used a little trick, and they were so busy fighting that they couldn't care less about the House of High Duke." "You do have some tricks up your sleeve." Sun Mingyue nodded. When it came to martial arts, she was naturally very confident. Although Chu Li was a genius, they were still not on the same level. However, when it came to scheming, sowing discord, and even borrowing strength to fight, Chu Li was better than her. She knew herself very well. Her forte was her insight, and no crafty plots could escape her eyes. Even the ghost domain of the human heart could not escape her eyes. She was not good at scheming, nor did she need to be good at it. As the saint of the Holy Church of Light, She needed to be upright and dignified, not petty trick. With Chu Li working with her, it would be like adding wings to a tiger. She had a special skill that allowed her to see through people's hearts. Since Chu Li could hide from her, he could easily hide from others too. He might really do something amazing. These thoughts ran through her mind and she said, "You know too much about the Holy Church and you're a big threat." Chu Li said, "Saint, you're not confident enough, and you're afraid that I'll harm the Holy Church, right?" "Yes." Sun Mingyue nodded. Chu Li smiled. "What good will it do me to go against the Holy Church? The Ji dynasty and the Li dynasty should work together, and not be controlled by the Fu dynasty. Weakening each other will only benefit the Fu dynasty. You don't have a say," Sun Mingyue said. "Even if the Li dynasty doesn't fight, the Ji dynasty will. When that happens, it won't be up to us, and we'll still be enemies. It's better to get rid of you now to avoid future troubles." Sigh. Chu Li sighed emotionally and shook his head. "I thought that the saint was broad-minded and superior to men, and that she would put the interests of the Holy Church above everything else and put aside her personal feelings. I didn't expect you to be like this. You can't fight against personal feelings. Saint, you want to kill me because you're angry that you've misjudged me, right? You've really disappointed me." Sun Mingyue replied calmly, "So what if I'm disappointed? So what if I'm not? Why should I not disappoint you? Chu Li, kill yourself. I won't touch your wife anymore. Otherwise, she'll need to be eliminated since she knows too much." Chu Li squinted his eyes and smiled. "Saint, don't you think you're being too cruel?" Sun Mingyue's face darkened. "Say no more, it's a waste of your breath." Chu Li said, "Are you so sure that you can defeat me? Do you think that you can defeat me?" Sun Mingyue laughed and shook her head. "Why struggle in vain?" Chu Li smiled. "How would I know if I don't fight? My skills have improved greatly recently, so I'd like to ask for your guidance, Saint." Sun Mingyue frowned and said coldly, "You're overestimating yourself. Come." Chu Li suddenly withdrew his inner energy as if he did not know any martial arts. The life and death scripture concealed all his cultivation level, and the heavenly demonic power that was hidden in the void by the life and death scripture reappeared. The heavenly demonic orb that was as small as a speck of dust flashed in front of his chest. When the heavenly demonic power was hidden in the void by the life and death scripture, the heavenly demonic orb seemed to have disappeared. It was silent and undetectable, but when the heavenly demonic power was activated, the heavenly demonic orb would wake up from its slumber. He knew Sun Mingyue's cultivation level and his own. Wei Wuwei's cultivation level was still lower than hers, let alone himself. This was the only way to defeat her, just like how he defeated Wei Wuwei. Sun Mingyue frowned and looked at him in surprise. She shook her head and smiled. "You've abandoned your martial arts?" Chu Li said, "How can I defeat the saint if I don't find another way?" "You're quite ambitious," Sun Mingyue said. "You're not thinking about escaping, but about defeating me. Your courage is commendable." Chu Li smiled. "Do you think that you're the best in the Grandmaster's boundary, Saint?" "That's right." Sun Mingyue scoffed proudly. She was confident that she was the best in the Grandmaster's boundary even in the martial arts world of the Fu dynasty. Without such confidence, how could she have such ambition? Chu Li said, "Then let's see who's better." He slowly pulled out the modesty sword. Usually, he would not bring the modesty sword when he came to the Li dynasty, but this time, he brought it along with him. He was no longer afraid of exposing his identity. Sun Mingyue suddenly threw a divine light fist. Chapter 3277. Ding. With a clear ring, Chu Li's body stiffened. His jade-like palm landed lightly on his chest. Bang! A muffled sound could be heard as the palm collided with his chest. He was sent flying as if a rope was yanking him from behind. Bang! He crashed into the wall 10 meters away. The wall shook as if it was about to collapse. Chu Li hung on the wall and did not fall down. His back was embedded in the wall. The heavenly demonic orb moved according to his will and devoured the palm energy. He was only slightly injured, but he was immediately healed by the spiritual energy from the life and death scripture. He looked flustered, but his body was unharmed. He looked at Sun Mingyue in shock. Sun Mingyue frowned as she looked at Chu Li. She felt that something was wrong. Chu Li leaned against the wall and asked in shock, "What martial art is this?" His mind was blank at that moment. Fortunately, Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture and the omniscient mirror were activated at the same time. The void in his mind was restored and he regained control of his body. "God-shaking finger," Sun Mingyue said. "Your cultivation level has improved greatly." Back then, she could defeat Chu Li with the divine light fist alone. Now, she needed another antique study. Chu Li said, "God-shaking finger is amazing. If it were not for the omniscient mirror and Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture, he would have been injured by Sun Mingyue and killed the next moment. Sun Mingyue would definitely kill him and would not hold back. This time, she would cut off his head. Even with the life and death scripture, he would not be able to revive. Under the pressure of life and death, he concentrated and activated the omniscient mirror and the nature restoration manifestation. Unfortunately, it was useless. The nature restoration manifestation could not predict her next move. She had too many antique studies and kept them hidden. She was like an iceberg that only revealed a corner. Sun Mingyue said, "It's useless even if your cultivation level improved greatly." Then, she used the divine light fist again. Chu Li raised his sword and stabbed it. He leaped toward Sun Mingyue and became one with his sword. He turned into a dark light and instantly shot toward her. Ding! Sun Mingyue touched the sword with her finger. Chu Li's body froze in the air. It was as if he was frozen in the air. Then, he fell. Sun Mingyue punched again. She knew the power of her God-shaking finger. It could shake one's mind in an instant and cause one's mind to go blank. One would be no different from an idiot and be at her mercy. Even if Chu Li had the Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture, which could break his God-shaking finger, he would need to go through a process, which would be enough to kill him. If someone else did not have the Mahavairokkana's immobility scripture, that person would be knocked out immediately and would need to sleep for 2 days to recover. This was the power of the God-shaking finger. It was extremely tyrannical, and she rarely used it. In order to end the battle quickly and not give Chu Li any chance to take advantage of her, she would not use it to avoid additional variables. However, Chu Li suddenly slanted forward, avoiding the punch and closing the distance between them at the same time. The tip of his sword was already at Sun Mingyue's perky chest, almost piercing the tip of her left breast. Sun Mingyue snorted and flicked her finger again. Ding! Her fair fingers touched the tip of the sword, but Chu Li suddenly shouted, "Tut!" Sun Mingyue was in a daze. Chu Li shouted using the musical assassination technique, which was similar to the God-shaking finger. It directly affected one's spirit and used the energy of one's soul, so its power was similar to the God-shaking finger. Chu Li sighed in his heart when the tip of his sword pierced her left breast. He was slightly disappointed that he had killed Sun Mingyue, but he did not show any mercy. If he did not kill Sun Mingyue, she would kill him without mercy. The best way was to cripple Sun Mingyue, but he knew that with Sun Mingyue's ability, she would recover quickly and even become stronger. In that case, he would be the one to die, so he had no choice but to destroy her. Ding! Sun Mingyue squinted her eyes, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. She suddenly came to her senses and retreated along the tip of the sword. A small hole had already appeared on her white gown. Chu Li shook his head and sighed. What a treasured garment! Chu Li's sword did not pierce through, but it hit her treasured garment, which was harder than iron and stone. The modesty sword was a treasured sword that could cut through iron like mud. Even if she was wearing armor, it could still be pierced through. It could not block his sword, but Sun Mingyue's treasured garment could block his sword. It was a rare treasure in the world. Sun Mingyue floated back 5 meters and looked down at the round hole on her chest. Her beautiful face was covered with a layer of frost. She slowly raised her head to look at Chuli. Her clothes began to move even though there was no wind, as if she was standing in a strong wind. Chuli took a deep breath and held the modesty sword tightly. He knew that Sun Mingyue was angered and was about to use her killing move. Sun Mingyue said in a low voice, "Chuli, you're the first person to force me to this point." Chuli smiled. "You flatter me. It's time for you to see the real divine light fist," Sun Mingyue said slowly. "Since you can disguise yourself as a disciple of the Holy Church of Light, I'll let you die under the divine light fist." Chuli frowned as he looked at her. She suddenly stretched out her hands and clenched them into fists. Suddenly, her fists became clear as if they were made of crystal. There was also a ball of light circulating around them, as if it was going to overflow at any time. It was extremely strange. Chu Li's heart trembled. He felt danger and wanted to turn around and escape. The heavenly demonic orb suddenly flickered and moved according to his will, ready to devour the fist force at any time. Divine Light Fist. Sun Mingyue scoffed and 2 balls of light instantly pierced Chu Li. Chu Li spat out a mouthful of blood in the air and crashed into the wall again. The 2 streams of light arrived in an instant. They were so fast that he could not react. The heavenly demonic orb reacted quickly and devoured the fist force in an instant. Then, it went on to devour the second fist force. However, there was a gap between the first and the second fist force. It was just a split second and his internal organs were severely injured. Spiritual energy surged from all directions and healed his internal organs. He was embedded in the wall and asked calmly, "Is this the divine light fist?" "That's right." Sun Mingyue nodded slowly and frowned at him. She did not expect his injuries to be so light. It was far from what she had imagined. She knew very well how powerful the divine light fist was. She thought that 1 hit would be enough to injure him and the second hit would be enough to kill him. Chu Li asked, "Why is our divine light fist different?" "Because you didn't cultivate it fully." Sun Mingyue said calmly, "You didn't cultivate the real divine light fist. Even a priest can't cultivate the real divine light fist?" Chu Li frowned. Sun Mingyue said slowly, "The divine light fist is not just a heart technique of inner energy. It also requires the Buddha of great light in your mind to coordinate with it. Only by combining the inside and outside can you master the divine light fist." "I see." Chu Li nodded slowly. He understood now. Unfortunately, he could not try cultivating it now even if he knew. Sun Mingyue was forcing him to kill himself by telling him this. She would not allow him to live. The more she told him, the stronger her killing intent would be. Sun Mingyue suddenly stretched out her fist. Suddenly 2 bright lights flashed in front of Chu Li. Bam! Chu Li spat out a mouthful of blood and slammed into the wall, sinking another 3 inches into it. Chu Li pushed himself off the wall and flew out. He landed on the ground covered in dust and a human-shaped mark appeared on the wall. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.